Hi, my name's Bob Grenier and I'm a volunteer with the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. So welcome to O-Day, more crop circles. Welcome this 6th of October 2024. And what you're seeing on the screen there is Takaaki Matsumoto's handwriting here. And what it says is what it says on this little photo folder. And just to prove that before the internet they still had cat memes or fluffy cats on things, there we go, kitten. And what you're seeing on the screen there, here, says mystery circles. Mystery circles. Hi Nathan Ford, hi Gordon Doherty, Paul O'Neill, hi Miki Avila, Alex Del Castillo, Mr. Game Mode, Artifact, Yin Gazda is in the house, hi Gary Johnson, EBB, hi Muggle1, hi Matthew Reynolds and Verity Hound. What a lovely group we have here. Hi Simeon Hine, a real expert in crop circles. Wonderful. Hi Steve A. Great to have you here. And assuming my computer hasn't died on me already. Oh dear. It's not a good sign. Hi Corky Goss and Carmen Miller. It's great to have you here, guys. Ret Oracle and Crypto Alchemist has come in early tonight. Wonderful. Black tie. Beautiful. Extinguished Gent. Very good. Like your handle. Luke Threadgoal. Hi everyone. How is everyone? Well, I have to say, thank you for everyone's time and patience to work through the first of these crop circle videos. It's actually been the most viewed video in 1 week in the MFMP's history, which is interesting. Never expected that, but it was the right time to start addressing this particular aspect. And I would have liked to have had more time to prepare this week, but for those of you that were following, I had to prepare a lot of streaming sessions and monitor those streaming sessions for the Russian conference. And actually, in the Russian conference on the Bull Lightning Day, they had one talk where this guy's in some part of Russia studying an area where there are often long-lived luminous objects in the surrounding valley. And in the area where these things occur, he observed strange curved trees. And not just one, but a whole series of curved trees with different radii moving out from the center. So that was interesting. And also where the main trunk had broken and it'd gone like that and gone like a sort of like a dog leg type thing. I don't know, like that. And then the original trunk had sort of produced a shoot and grown up again. Now, I don't know. I've seen some curved trees in my time. I, in fact, saw one earlier today. So these are not things that are impossible. But I thought it was an interesting thing to think about because in the case of a tree, it doesn't have in the trunk these pulvini, these parts of the plant, cereal crops typically, or other plants that have mobile sort of leaves, where there is this shifting of water from one part to another part, enabling it to track the vector of gravity or sun. So I found that very, very interesting. I will come back to that presentation and look to do a translation. I've now got a good proportion of the slides. There's a large body of work. I might farm that out to you guys, having done a tutorial on it, and then maybe even get that translated from Russian into English with 11 Labs. Some very, very interesting work. If you don't know Bitchkov, Bitchkov was not going to give a presentation because he had a stroke earlier in the year. However, he was keen to do that, and it's testament to the guy's knowledge. He gave a very, very good presentation, even having recovered from a stroke. So he's one of the ultimate legends in the study of ball lightning. which I believe is a related phenomenon to crop circles. Now, these crop circles were, as far as I am aware, in the main island of Japan. And here it is. And this doesn't look like your typical man-made crop circle here. It's less perfect. You've got the vorticity on this one over here. There's something in the very close foreground here with maybe a tuft in the center. This seems to have a tuft in the center. This seems to have some vorticity, maybe in the other direction with a tuft in the center. There seems to be a very different crop in the background here. Almost looks like cabbages. I don't know, but this is in the middle of a residential area. It's not your atypical crop circle location. And this was actually in a place called Shin-Oji. And the translations I said for what you see on the cover of the photo album here, this part here, this means Shin-Oji, and this bit is mystery circle. Okay, and in fact, in his English handwriting inside, he writes mystery circle. There we go. So, unfortunately, he doesn't actually have a date on these photos. But in the last page of the book, there is this photo album, is a separate photo inserted of his daughter, and it reads the 22nd of October 1994. And it is not from the same film. It's a separate, it's in fact, one is, I think one on the back of this one, it's a Fuji film. I think one of them's Fuji and the other one's Canon or something. This is Fuji color on the back of that, with the one that's actually got a date on it. And it's in the back of the album. And the other ones are, what are they? They're Kodak paper, okay? So these ones are Kodak, and the one on the back is Fuji. So we can pretty much safely assume that this is prior to 1994, October 1994. And the other waypoint we have are lots of like old cars, like this particular car here. It looks like a Datsun of some type, a Nissan type car here. So those are the kind of waypoints. There also is a truck in here which looks very new, and it has 86 at the end of its number plate. I don't know about Japanese number plates, but it has 86 here. So the truck looks pretty new, and therefore you would imagine that somewhere between 1986 and 1994. And as we go through this, again, in this image here, you can see this isn't your sort of typical, what one might call a man-made crop circle. You can see a little bit closer up here. And, you know, is it a crop circle? I don't know. But the discussion was in that scientific paper that we saw that it might be that these kind of crop circles, they occur many places, but because they're not so rigidly defined, then people might just brush them off. But it's the helical kind of nature of the downing of the stalks of the crop, which I think is a signature. Now, in this second set of images within this same photo album, he has what look like onions, and this is the kind of disadvantage you have when you are just a tourist and you come to a place like this and you can't get an aerial view. Imagine that the people living in these apartments would have a much better view of whether there was anything torsional going on within this crop. But to me, it pretty much looks like it's been blown over one way and it's kind of bent down here. Now, I have grown onions. I've grown onions last year, and typically when they get a bit tall, they get a bit top heavy and they blow over. So I'm not sure I'm seeing anything of any real interest in this shot, but zooming in, you can see all of these very boxy cars here, which do strike me as sort of late 80s, early 90s. So I think that really is one way to place this photo. I've got a close-up here of these onions, and yeah, it really does look like they've been blown over. So without having an aerial shot, and of course people weren't having access to easy drones back then, I don't think we're seeing anything particularly interesting in this shot. Look, they all seem to be blown over in this direction, at least in the position he is in here. Now, one thing about doing things openly is that if there are people out there that are having a similar interest, they can see your work, and the beauty of that is it's a iterative process. And when you can't find stuff, you guys are like digital ferrets. You go and find the information out there, and someone let someone else know that I was talking about crop circles last week, and that person that was informed was Jeffrey Wilson. And today I received a message from him, which I might read some of it if he's okay with that. If he's on the call, that would be great too. And he sent me the news article from the original 1985 crop circle that my father showed me. And whilst it doesn't have a brilliant image in the background here, you can see just about make out the main circle here and one of the little circles in the foreground. Now, Jeffrey Wilson actually has this iccra.org website, and under this link, levengood/levengood.html, he has had, with the permission of Dr. Levengood and one of his co-authors, the permission to have transcribed and digitized his papers. And so you can go and have a look at those. We're going to actually have a look at another one of those tonight, because I think it's extremely profound with regard to everything that we've been studying with how this might actually work. We're going to also talk about how it relates to other work that's been done by Matsumoto, by the MFMP, by the CIA, by John Hutchison, and Alexander Shishkin. And I think you're going to get an overall picture of where I'm coming from. For those people that are commonly in this forum and have listened to some of my blatherings over the last 5-6 years, these things will be a little bit of reworking what you already know. But I have to recognize that there was a lot of people that came in for the first time, and they were hearing lots of words and lots of people's names that they had never heard of before. And whilst I would encourage all of those people that are interested in absolutely knowing those people's bodies of work, going back for the first O-Day and really back to the beginning of 2017 and zipping through as fast as one can the body of work, it might be good to just refresh a couple of aspects that the common regular viewers, my appreciated group, they already know. So this is going to be a little bit of going over a couple of things that you already know, so that we can kind of tie these things together. Anyway, I'm going to read this paper here, and again, it calls it UFO Theory on Mystery Circles from the 5th of July 1985 in the West Sussex County Times, Horsham. And I just think that's amusing because it says mystery circles there, and here it says mystery circle in English and in Japanese in Matsumoto's own handwriting in both languages. Okay, so it's UFO Theory on Mystery Circles. A mystery fit for the files of scientist and visionary Arthur C. Clarke was being speculated upon by villagers this week. On Monday, whilst driving to his boutique in Rustington, Jeremy Fisher of Grove Lane, West Chiltington, spotted some strange markings in a cornfield on the side of Long Furlong, a twisted country road between Findon and Clapham. And after studying them, he is now convinced the impressions were made by alien visitors. I was so intrigued by them that I nearly drove into a lorry, Jeremy explained afterwards. With him was his wife Carol, a 26-year-old and 26-year-old Lisa Wigg, who lives in Storrington. I thought it was very unusual, said Carol. The marks had either been left by a UFO or it was a hoax. Those are the two options, right? Now, we all know that a UFO might not necessarily be an alien UFO. It might just be an unidentified flying object. Was What the three had spotted in the corn were 5 perfectly formed circles. The one in the middle measured 18 yards. We have some metrics now across, and the smaller ones 5 yards, 18 to 5. The smaller circles appeared to be spaced at an equal distance from the center. Very important, because the rough image that was placed into the article in 1998 did not have them equally spaced from the center. When I got to the shop, I phoned Worthing Police, said Jeremy. They were very skeptical. One of their theories was that the wind had done it. But he is still convinced the circles were left by visiting aliens. 20 years ago, I saw a flying saucer on the brow of the hill when I was driving home along the same road, he said. It was a huge disc. It was winter time and I could see it clearly outlined against the sky. Also at the scene on Monday afternoon was Jean Monger from Clapham. She claims to have seen a UFO over the area 8 years ago. It floated across the forest. It was cigar-shaped and had green and red lights. A man who identified himself as a UFO watcher made a brief appearance at the scene. He said that the marks had been reported to him and he had come to inspect them. I saw 2 of these sets of markings next to each other in a field in Hampshire. They were exactly the same shape. It was in 1983 at exactly this time of the year, he claimed. Tony Wicks, manager for Findham Farms, which owns the land, was more sceptical. I noticed the marks on Saturday at about 7:30 a.m. I thought somebody had been having a game. I don't believe it's anything to do with outer space. I don't know what it is, but I think that it's been done by human beings with a piece of string. I heard of something similar appearing at Winchester. He said there were no footprints near the circles, but there was a trail where the corn had been trampled. The fissures remained unswayed. Carol took a few ears of corn away with her from the large circle. She claims to have psychic abilities and intends to analyse the samples to shed some light on the mystery. Well, what about that? Right, so, hi Ben Factor, hi Malcolm, welcome to the house. You're from down under. Malcolm is, I guess, in Australia now. Hi Athena Mac. Hi Cypher, DIY Projects with Chauxis. Yes, he's in Australia. Wonderful. I've got some news for you coming this week, Malcolm. You'll be quite interested. Right, blah, blah. So that's the article. I've blown it up there just in case it's any better to see. Now, on the next slide, I did a little bit more digging. I wasn't happy that the website that I'd originally found of Valerie Martin from Findham News, or that I got her name out of the 1998 article, she had a website where she actually had the same text that was in the 1998 article, and she had some picture holders where you would imagine there would be pictures of the crop circle that my father showed me in 1985. However, the pictures weren't there on the Wayback Machine. The site had not been live since, I think, 2008 or 9, maybe earlier. However, I wasn't going to give up, and I looked into Findham News archives, the local PDFs of their news articles, and I came across an article from 2016, and at the bottom of that article, which was written also by Valerie Martin, it listed her website, which had changed name. Now, I still couldn't find anything after 2016 on the Wayback Machine, but there were entries from the middle of 2016, and on that website, I mean, the domain name is now up for sale. There's no new entries since 2016, but on the Wayback Machine, I did find the images. So here we are. They have been risen from the potential dying in the book burning of websites, and this is why I'm talking about persistence, not only resilience, but persistence with anything that the project does moving forward. It has to be stored in a way that this cannot be lost. And to a degree, books are really good for doing that. So that's one of my focuses. So here we go. Photos have been found, and here they are. So the one on the left shows a semi-aerial photo. I don't quite know how they took this. I mean, I think that's the far downs there. So they might have been up on the downs itself, giving a little bit better of an angle on it. But what I can say, just like that article that was sent to me by one Jeffrey Wilson, thank you very much, Jeffrey Wilson here, Jeffrey Wilson. Just like it said here that the smaller circles appeared to be spaced at an equal distance from the center. That is what we see here, certainly on the ones to the side. This is very much in line, and it really is very, very crisp. And this is much more kind of what I remember, but this was the view from the road. And so you can see it's a much more ellipse shape as you view it from the road. And here is in fact Tony Wicks, the manager of the farm at the time. He's standing in the field, and it's just a shame he's not fully in the lotus position at the center of the crop, which I think would be rather amusing. Anyway, so having seen that this is both described in the newspaper article from 1985 as being equidistant from the center of the larger circle, the smaller circles, and them all being perfect, and also you can literally see it on this photo. I have taken the liberty of adjusting the rather dodgy sketch that was in the 1998 document. And reason being is that whilst the smaller circles, if you scaled them so that they fitted, and the big circle was fitted, this was off center here. And so taking note of those two references, I've centered it, and we get a very, very nice correlation between the distance between the outside and the square section here and the outside and the square section that would be drawn between the four subsections of these crosses and this so-called cross. Okay, so adjusting for that, and I managed to find my own images of the Austrian underground. I have adjusted for that, and you can see here that on the top of the Templar altar here we have this, and I've just shown you it perfectly lines up with this, and that this perfectly basically lines up with the crop circle you see in the field, albeit I think this is a 4, and then what is this? I think we're going to break that down. Okay, so what are the details here? Where do we think these Templars got their information from? Well, they were sent off on what was called the Crusades to the Holy Land and thereabouts in the period 1095 to 1291. And that's very, very interesting, because if you look at this particular cross and you do a bit of digging, the guy that was doing the talks there, I'm sorry, I don't ever remember clocking his name, but I shall credit him in the references as soon as Yin tells me. If Yin can tell me in the chat, that would be great. I could do it right now. So Yin organized this tour, and so hopefully she'll be able to put the name there. But when he was talking about that particular subcross, he gave it a particular name, and he said Qatar. And I was thinking Qatar, and he said that the Templars were protecting the Qatars and stuff, and this was their cross. And I thought, well, Qatar, I don't think it's that. Anyway, I actually worked out what the image was from looking at a whole series of images of different types of crosses. And it turns out that this is actually the Occitan cross. And Occitan is an area of southern France, sort of where you have Nice and those kind of areas down in that kind of region of France. And the Occitan cross comes from the 12th century. Okay, so this subcross here is from the 12th century. As we know that from previous study, that this was the symbol of God-controlled power, which was used as the first symbol of the Order of Electrical Engineers before the one that you can actually find on Wikipedia. And I talked about that many moons ago. In fact, in 2016, that was my first actual symbol put into a presentation. And for those that it offends, I'm sorry, this is just reality. You need to understand where things come from and understand history. But here we go, 1095 to 1291. So the idea that they would be using this in this Templar's cross altar here makes a lot of sense when, if these were Templars, because this being in the 12th century is right when the Crusades were kind of at their height, or you know, in the major part. So it makes sense that they would do this. And in fact, this is actually the Occitan and Cathar, and it's spelt C-A-T-H-A-R. So you can understand why I couldn't understand what he was saying, and it wasn't so easy to find. But anyway, you can go to Wikipedia and look at the Occitan cross there, and you can look at its history. But this is the Occitan or Cathar cross, and he didn't mention that this cross was from the 12th century, but later he did mention something else, okay? So if you're going to the Middle East and you're trying to find out, you know, the Holy Grail, and you're trying to find out why things are so special there, and you're going around that whole region, it stands to reason that you would come across in your journey the stela like this. And of course, this ended up in the British Museum, and that this is actually from 814 BC, and it's also got cuneiform on the side. I've spoken about this before. That's over 1,000 years earlier. So it's indicating potentially that this is knowledge that's much, much older than 814 years BC. And I showed that the exact interaction here, here is the double layer non-radiating boundary of a sub-tor in a 4-tor N-level tor. And very interestingly, if you take a straight line here and a straight line here and a straight line here and a straight line here, what you actually end up with is the Schwarzkreuz. The Schwarzkreuz, which is the cross of the German people at a certain time in their history, unfortunately. But there we go. So the Schwarzkreuz is another cross that comes in here, but this clearly is a Cathar cross, and this is clearly the symbol of God-controlled power, and I think it's represented nicely and accurately there. Okay. So did the people doing the Crusades find this information out? I suspect they did. Now I've got a video so you can get a context of where the altar here is placed in relation to a second thing that I want to share with you. And this is here. And it's going to take a little bit of time, and hopefully it hasn't skipped over it here. So there's the cross, sorry, the altar, and here is a walkway that comes from an upper level. Okay, so I'm just going to play that again. So over here, you've got the altar here. This is the altar. And what I was looking at is the top of the altar here. Okay, and then we come around to the left in this room, and you can see actually on here, you can see a lot of Vesica Pisces here and rings, okay? But we come round over here, and in the center of this room, is if you stand in the center and you look up, what you see is effectively what is at the center of the altar. You have it, it's this bit and this bit and this bit and this bit, okay? So this would be the center, and it's kind of like made it into a mesh, if you could imagine it going out, but it is the centerpiece, okay? But what you have on the left is an anti-vortex, and on the right, you have a vortex. Vortex on the right, anti-vortex on the left, with the center, which would imply that you should have one above and one below. This would also need to be rotated 45 degrees to be accurate. But if you're carving a square section in here, then it makes sense to rotate it this way round if you've only got two either side. But this is also a 4-arm vortex. A 4-arm vortex. And as we showed via experiment, it is from the 4-arm vortex, 4-subtor vortex onwards that you get stable beam coming out. It is the God's, with a little g, toolbox, the God control power under control, okay, when you have a 4-subtor. Okay, so this to me is, you know, when I'm seeing these things, I'm thinking, well, this is just frankly absurd. Now, when he was talking about these things, and here's a photo that I took so you can see it more clearly, he said that these beams, when they dug out these underground areas and they found them, they were so soft that you could push your fingers into the wood, okay? So what they did is a special preservation technique that's been developed for ships that get dug out of peat bogs and things like that. In fact, I had some furniture in India, and I think a similar sort of process was used with that. And what it is rubber wood. When a rubber tree falls, and in fact, a rubber, you can only kind of grow a rubber tree for about 30 years. And then you'd have to cull it and redo the plantation. I think it basically produces good rubber from the 7th year through to the 30th year. And then you cut it and you plant new saplings. The wood itself then is waste. And in fact, almost immediately, this invasive beetle goes in and it starts eating it. What they developed is this technique to impregnate it with a resin under high pressure. And it solidifies and stabilizes the wood, and it becomes as long-lived and workable in a similar way to teak. I don't know whether it's something similar going on here, but whatever, he described this process where they took these pieces of wood that you could put your finger into, and they would it would give way, and it made it rigid, usable beams again, okay, and it preserved the carvings. Now, what he also claimed was that these pieces of these beams on here were in fact from the 12th century. From the 12th century. Okay, so we have two waypoints here. One is the cross, is from the Occitan cross. The Carter cross is from the 12th century. He didn't mention the age of that, but he said that from carbon dating, or rather he knew, and I presume it's from carbon dating, that these are from the 12th century. He said that these ones, these stone lintels here that are supporting the wood, were actually from the 1st century. Now, I don't know whether that's, you know, the fact. That's what he said, okay? But it makes sense that these are from the 12th century. And then if we zoom into, let's say, the anti-vortex here and take a closer look, what do we have here on the anti-vortex? Firstly, we have a tor in the center. So you would have a tor produced by 4 subtors, okay? And the 4 subtors would make this tor very much under control. There would be no beaming coming out here and here. Same with this, and you would imagine one above and one below, as you see on the top of the altar here, where you have 4 subtors, and each of those have 4 subtors in them, okay? And then you come forward. What are we actually looking at here in this substructure here? Well, we are looking at another type of cross, and it's called the club's cross, okay? And the club's cross effectively is orthogonal to this cross, okay? And it has stuff feeding into it. I didn't know that this was called a cross, but I now know it's called a cross. So, you have 4 tors, and then in that makes the n-1, and then you have 4 tors making the n-2. This is about as stable as you can possibly imagine a n-2 structure to be, and I don't know whether this would be valid to say, and maybe experts in symbology like Stephen could step in and pass comment on this either now or later. But it seems to me that we have a vortex and an anti-vortex even at this level. So a two-level vortex is fine at this level. It's so much inside the overall structure, you're not going to have any leakage. Okay, but it is valuable to have a 4-tor structure here, a 4-tor structure here, and the overall structure to be a 4-tor structure, as was on the top of the altar. And so the evidence does look like this was a 12th century site for Templars that really knew something about the places that they had visited. And in coming months, I will show you sections of a book written by a Russian author. I will do the translation, that was sent to me by Alexander Shishkin. And in it, it blew me away. It totally blew me away. The author is very specifically saying that the vortex and the toroidal vortex are the only two negentropic objects in nature. Therefore, if you are fusing matter in anything that is relating to the way nature works, or if you are doing what life does, you will need the tornado or the ring tornado, the ring vortex soliton, in order to do that. And in fact, as we can see, the ring soliton is in fact built from sub-vortices. One begets the other. And I can imagine this, and I talked about how you can start the vortex, and because it has shear in the opposite direction and orthogonal, it builds upon itself and it starts building the substructures. So if you keep providing it energy, it will start building the substructures and the substructures and substructures. And when you get to a certain threshold, which I think that we managed to decode was limited by this size, the 25 picometers of the atomic hydrogen, you end up by producing up to 2 kiloelectron volt electrons from photons that are inside the electrodynamic structure that collide with the core electrons in the magnetic core, which may or may not be in a state of coherence, and they're knocked out at that energy, or it hits the iron-rich crenellated core and up to 2 kiloelectron volt electrons are pushed out from the system. Everything's kind of nicely lining up, and so I'm going to talk about a couple of things now which I think are related to how the crop circle phenomena is going on, and I want you to think about these things. So if you just give me a second. The first one is, if you haven't got it, it's Steps to the Discovery of Electronuclear Collapse, and we will be doing the updated Kickstarter for this next week, where many of these images will be absolutely beautiful and in color and so forth. But anyway, the first one that I think is relevant to talk about here from Matsumoto is Microscopic Observations of Palladium Used for Cold Fusion, and it's on page 108 onwards. And what he found was, when he went into a palladium, deuterated palladium rod that had been used in cold fusion, he found these cracked sections in here. And ultimately, he found that they were these spherical objects that were forming on the grain boundaries. You can see here, little ones here, but they end up getting bigger and joining into each other and merging and wetting on their boundaries. And ultimately, they would form at the grain boundaries, and they would start consuming the crystal grain inside the material. The crystal grain was disappearing, new elements surrounding on the outside, and some matter has gone somewhere, we don't know where. Okay, so that's the first point, and ultimately he concluded that that was due to micro ball lightning. We are saying that we are producing something very similar here. It is this magnetohydrodynamic structure that has this wheel within a wheel within a wheel structure. Now, the second point I want to bring up at this point is, let me get my notes. somewhere. Where did I put it? Okay. The second one is kind of related to that, and I'm going to find it on my blog, and you can find it with me. La-di-da-di-da. And I want... so it is the CIA document which I reconstructed, and it's to do with the Psychokinesis party. And for those people that feel a little bit upset that I'm talking about these things, well, all I can say is, unfortunately, you got to when it gets to this point. Okay, so essentially, it's called PK Party History. It was approved for release on the 7th of the 3rd, or 3rd of the 7th, 2001. And it's in the CIA archives at this address here. And it's by Jack Houck, December the 19th, 1983. And essentially, what they found was when they looked at the crystal grain boundaries, they saw that there had been slippage along the crystal grain boundaries. Okay? And they believed that the brain, which we now know to produce toroidal moments, was able to interact with the metal and cause the crystal grain boundaries to slip and the metal to become plastic and be able to be bent. Okay? They're calling it overheating along grain boundaries. Melting occurs. I do not think it is melting. I think it is potentially over-energizing those charge clusters that are likely to form on the crystal grain boundaries, as was observed here in electrolysis with a palladium, deuterated palladium electrode. Now, so that's what I believe is going on there, and the same thing was observed by John Hutchison. Let me see if I can find the particular article I'm referring to. And this was in my old Steemit blog here, and the image that I want to refer you to is here with John Hutchison effect. And so this was where this particular bar of aluminium was glowing orange, and John turned off the electrodynamic equipment, and Alec Pizarro, who was working with him at the time, went over to try and pick this thing up. He could feel it didn't feel hot when he was close to it, and he went to go and pick it up, and it actually felt cool to the touch, and he ended up by leaving his fingerprints squished into the aluminium bar to a certain depth. Okay, so this here is another process by which the metal bonds, which are very different from covalent or ionic bonds or polar bonds, they are turned into a jelly-like state. And these are things that I think are very, very important to understand. The electron ability to participate in normal bond behavior has broken down. Okay, so I'm going to show you another example, and then I'm going to show you what I shared at Strasbourg, and then I'm going to go into one of the other papers by Levengood and one of his other colleagues. So this is just a bit of grounding in how electrons or bonding between electrons can break down. Okay. And at the end of this, you're going to see that there are a number of applications that come out of this. One that was identified by Levengood, but I think the other applications we've discussed, but a variation on one of those other applications which could have profound implications for farming and healthy farming. So let me find that one. And what am I thinking about? I'm thinking about that, aren't I? So give me a second here. So just to reiterate for those people that can't remember or don't know, it was this sample of copper pipe where a hemispherical section disappeared, and I looked at the boundary on the SEM and I found a 2-order structure with a vortex, a 3-order structure with a vortex, and when you got to 4 it didn't have the vortex. It started to just be under control. When you have 5, it's starting to get round on the outside, still under control. 6, very much under control. When you start to get 8, it starts to have substructures forming in the center, okay? But it's still kind of roundish, okay? And that's how I came to derive this. And it wasn't the only person that has seen substructures. The person commissioned by the US Department of Energy and worked at Los Alamos and Princeton and so forth. In their last work, they saw tores with subtores in, and I showed, and I will show again, that that was observed by Matsumoto as well and not published. But the key point that I want to draw your attention to at this stage is this. It's the water spout here, and I am arguing that some form of dark matter is able to be, which has a toroidal moment, and that would be, an example would be relic neutrinos. They have a toroidal moment. They can be pulled into this thing. And if you look at what you're seeing here, these flares from this 1969 image, they're showing the smoke going this way, which means the prevailing wind direction is this way, here and here. However, you would imagine that it's coming in like this, but it's not. It's going there. So I have argued that the flux of relic neutrinos coming in here, as an example, it could be other forms of dark matter, but I'm calling it as relic neutrinos. They come in and they interact with all of the matter here such that it changes the friction essentially to 0. So there is an event horizon where you have this very fast moving air, and it's the whole lot is just being pulled along by this vortex of dark matter. And when it gets to this point, it gets so concentrated, or it gets so depleted at this point because the vector of pull is so strong at this point, and this is just the orthogonal vector to the torus above. This is the next Tor level up, cutting through the ocean in the structure of the physical vacuum. That it's being depleted here. One or the other. It's either overly saturated with chi, let's call it, prana, or it's not saturated enough because it's being pulled away. And the water, weak polar bonds are separating. They do not bind together. They do not need 100 degrees in order to have them turn into water gas. And they just separate, and the water gets levitated along with the flux of relic neutrinos, which is counteracting the gravity-driven relic neutrino flux down from the cosmos to the center of the Earth. Okay? And I believe that that is what is going on to a degree in the wind hex, because the wind hex is essentially exactly the same structure. You have charged, separated material in here, and that causes this toroidal moment. The toroidal moment acts somewhere around here, and it also acts in the subtors in there, and material gets desiccated for free. And I think that's because it gets smashed up, but all of the water that's in there ends up becoming water gas and just lofts out through the top where the main vector like this is going. And so this has extreme implications for what we are going to observe. Now, the last one I wanted to show you as a context before we go and read Dr. Levengood's work is in the presentation I gave in Strasbourg. So if you just give me a second there. don't want to load too much in at this point. Okay, so my cover slide in the presentation in Strasbourg was this shield, which it turned out I was shocked because it had 47 subdivisions of the tors in the main tor, and I asked the person who was running the gift shop who did this belong to, and he said this was the battle shield of the head honcho of the Knights Hospitaliers, which they worked alongside the Knights Templar. They were basically the doctors and nurses, or doctors mostly. They helped patch people up until they ended up becoming a kind of order that did similar things to the Knights Templar. Okay, so it was the Grand Master of the Valletta house. It was his personal battle shield with the 47 subtors, and we know that 47 is very, very stable. 48 is pushing the threshold. Okay, so that wasn't what I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you these things from the work of Matsumoto, and the fact that Matsumoto had observed other ones which are tors with tors, and he had actually observed one with 48, and the 48 one, it would appear, had subtors in it. So this is a wheel within a wheel within a wheel. Okay. Now, when it comes to causing matter to fall apart, you can see that in the work that we looked at with Benjamin Huang, where we'd have this tornadic structure come down and interact with the material in the copper and cause it to be stripped here. And when the thing died, a tornado of material came out with stellar synthesis in there. So on the left, we see the tornadic beam coming down from the overall clustered structure and sucking up a strip of copper. Absolutely phenomenal when you think about it. But that isn't the only example where we saw something similar. We've seen this in Matsumoto's work here, if it's going to show me. I'm pushing it here. This is the ball lightning here, and this is the tornado as it's interacting with copper. This is in the 2018 that I studied in 2018, but it was produced in 2017. This is the tornado cut into fused quartz. Same kind of track. You have the circular bits as the bits go round, the substructures go round, and then the long tracks as it's just grating into the surface. And here we have in boron nitride, the second hardest substance known to man, a turning around as well as a straight line going on with the tornadic beam. And we saw the sucking in to the vortex here, and I've played this before, and you can see where the stuff is being sucked into these subtor structures. And I gave other examples where this is stripping triple alpha from this piece of tungsten, leaving strontium, and it leaves a carbon film here, and then it makes these elements, all the elements, stellar elements, synthesized elements in this area here. In the case of the experiment by Urian, which I analyzed, where we had the ball lightning on top, the hemisphere on top, and it left exactly the magnetohydrodynamic structure. Very, very important. It's magnetohydrodynamics that is doing this. You can actually see how the brass here is bent when it goes inside the non-radiating boundary. And it's actually what I believe it's trying to do. It's trying to fold this brass onto itself and then basically wrap this material up. Okay, and that's kind of what probably caused the copper to disappear, but it happens instantaneously. It wraps itself and wraps itself and wraps itself and wraps itself. Okay. Now, if we look at this triangular area, which is the shape of the subterranean level in the Great Pyramid, and it is exactly the same shape as the areas which had transmutation in the 1992 awarded quantum coherent nuclear reactor patent of Solin. This is the area, and outside we have brushed brass, but inside that we have a hexagonal array with a little round spot in the middle in this area here. Okay, and I believe that is where you're getting the superfluid, extremely dense relic neutrinos is being densified here, and it's over energizing this copper, and it's causing it to fall apart, be pulled up here, and probably go through this hole and end up being deposited down here along with the material that's doing the same thing as being occurring on this side, and it's going through a wormhole and coming over here. Okay, so this is the super twist that's going on in this system. The other concept is it's doing something like this or this. It's depressurizing this. So because it's depressurizing it, the flux is coming through the backside. So either way, there's a great flux of chi or prana or Holy Spirit or whatever you like to call it coming through here, and it's causing this. And what happens with a superfluid, if you have a bowl of, say, a Bose-Einstein condensate of helium, for instance, and you give it some angular velocity, the whole thing won't spin round going a different speed to the center. What it'll do is it'll end up producing these hexagonal areas where you have these phase singularities, where you get separate, smaller vortices in there rotating around. And I can't help thinking that it's a bit similar to Maxwell's 1860s model of the ether. Okay, so that being said, you can see all the hexagonal arrays here. So I believe that that's what's going on. And here we go. Here is this is the Gross-Pekinski or whatever it is. I can't remember offhand. Model of what happens when you have a Bose-Einstein condensate and then you spin the outside of it, and it starts to produce these subvortices which regularly space in a hexagonal array. And so I think that's what is going on in this structure. So essentially what I'm saying, I missed that, maybe I missed that. Yeah, so here is the vortices that's going on. You see this in the Sapphire experiment, you see it in our own experiments. In fact, here's one later on by Henk. I think somewhere we've got one, maybe not in this. I don't know whether I showed it in this particular one. No, I didn't show it in this particular presentation, but you know what I'm talking about. So yeah, I think this is what's going on, and it's such an intense flux, and it's such an intense flux of a condensate, and that condensate is being spun with such vorticity that it is breaking up into a substructure, and you are seeing the effects of that here. It's causing these subvortices to appear in the superfluid, which are over-energizing localized areas of the brass and causing it to disintegrate. Okay? And there we go. So this is the context on what I'm saying. I've said for a very long time that I believe what's going on is a electrodynamic situation is set up so that you control something which is what keeps... I need to show you one more paper before we move forward, and that is of Alexander Shishkin's, so that you can understand exactly where I'm coming from. So, and just see. So I'm just going to read this for those of you who have not read it. It's called Where is the Atom Battery? I I've been thinking about this article for a long time. It was prompted by the works of these two authors, published on the website, the Academy of Trinitarianism. The main idea is the process of extracting energy from the ether goes on in all electromagnetic oscillatory systems, but the ether as a source of energy and prima materia is disregarded by modern classical physics. For example, the Bohr model of the atom is a semi-classical model of the atom proposed by Niels Bohr in 1913. He based it on the planetary model of the atom put forward by Rutherford. However, from the point of view of classical electrodynamics, an electron in Rutherford's model moving around the nucleus would have to radiate energy continuously and very quickly, and having lost it, fall onto the nucleus. Basically, the Bohr model of an atom, which you will be taught at school mostly until you get up to higher levels, is basically an impossible thing. And for a similar reason that I was talking about how the electromagnetic waves are produced from the ball lightning structure that leads to these various colors, both invisible through the visible to the UV to the X-ray, and then it becomes invisible to the naked eye at that point. To overcome this problem, Bohr introduced the assumption that electrons in an atom can move along only certain stationary orbits in which they do not emit energy, and emission or absorption occurs only at the moment of transition from one orbit to another. Theorists have successfully proved the absence of radiation purely mathematically. However, the atom also rotates, so one more assumption must be made. There is some kind of eternal battery inside the nucleus of an atom. So to accept the model of a normal atom as you are taught in school and often even in university, you have to accept there is a perpetuum mobile in every single atom that exists. But even modern researchers who accept the existence of the ether still for some reason adhere to the generally accepted model of the atom in their research. Indicative in this sense is the work of Zatelepin and Baranov, dedicated to dark hydrogen. You will have seen a lot of talk about dark hydrogen in the Russian conference for those people that subscribe to that. In the work, the authors talk about dark matter and provide experimental evidence for the existence of dark hydrogen based on the baryon ion. In this non-classical model of an atom, two protons rotate around the nucleus in the form of an electron pair bound by magnetic forces. And again, the authors refer to theorists who prove the absence of radiation from a mathematical point of view. But where does the energy to sustain the process come from? Is the eternal battery hidden in all components of the atom? According to the authors, dark hydrogen is born during the electric discharge in heterogeneous water-air environment. According to the assumption, it is a stable particle. The characteristic size of this particle is about 10 to the power minus 13 meters. The authors conducted a series of experiments and presented the following evidence confirming dark hydrogen. Blah, blah, blah. However, the mathematical proofs of theorists are opportunistic, since theorists, as a rule, adapt to the regime that exists in science. The assumptions of the authors and the experimental evidence they provide do not convince me, that's Alexander Shishkin and his colleagues, the following reasons. Anyway, blah, 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 blah. Right. This is when we are talking about all of these different things over the ages. Soft X-rays with energies up to 10 kiloelectron volts are constantly recorded under any rapidly occurring mechanical and electromagnetic effects on matter and are associated with the formation and destruction of energy clusters, and ECs. This is described in detail in this paper, which you can go and see. Energy clusters are quasi-stable formations. They are constantly present around us, but fundamental science, as a rule, does not notice these formations. ECs have many names. Tesla called them radiant energy. Wilhelm Reich called them orgone energy. Georgy Messias called them ectons. Ken Shoulders called them charge clusters. Yuji Bajetov, erzions. I.M. Shekparanov, Kozyrev-Dirac monopoles. Leonid Orezkiev, Loschak monopoles. In everyday life, this phenomenon is called static electricity. Right. What do you get in the things that we were describing last week leading to crop circles? There's a lot of charge clusters in the sky, right? Caused by ionization or by weather systems. And then you have a different potential in the ground, particularly caused by the world's deepest chalk aquifer. Energy clusters are high penetrating and behave like magnetic monopoles. And I've argued that they are topological monopoles, and our model that we have developed over the last several years looks like it better shows what is observed by Aalto University in their topological monopoles. Both their prediction model is weaker than ours would show, based on what they observe in condensates of atoms. In magnetic fields, the destruction of energy cluster produces an avalanche of 10 to the power 8 to 10 to the power 11 of fast electrons with energies up to 10 kiloelectron volts, and ions, 5 orders of magnitude less than electrons. Consequently, the energy cluster has an enormous energy of up to 8 millijoules. It is this energy that can explain all kinds of microtracks, tracks, scratches, blackening, etc. on photographic emulsions, optical discs, and cloud chambers. And he gives a bunch here that he has observed. Therefore, active detectors in experiments involving extremely high intensity impacts on materials often register unusual or anomalous signals. So, when you have a thing that is a big energy cluster and it breaks up, what are you likely to get? You might get loads of small energy clusters. Is it any surprise that you see energetic effects in these crop circles? I don't think it's surprising. The authors of this work called a similar signal from an explosion of an energy cluster precursor signal of the appearance of gamma quantum. Similar anomalous signals were recorded by helium neutron, blah, blah, blah. So he's talking about his experience with this. At high concentrations of energy clusters, they can explode not only on the surface of electronics. Oh, hold on. A large concentration of energy clusters leads to freezing of computers, failure of electronic components and circuits due to the explosion on their surface of EC, and to accidents in power grids. All of these things are kind of things that you observe in crop circles. People's phones or whatever, their recording devices, they have this freezing process going on. I mean, it stops working. It crashes. This is the problem researchers face while working with electric discharges, which is directly noted by the authors of 4. At high concentrations of energy clusters, they can explode not only on the surface of electronics, but also directly in the room, putting electronics and appliances of power systems out of operation. We literally experienced this in GS 5.2. Such a case occurred during the studies on biological effects in the vicinity of high voltage electric discharge in water-air environment. This fact was voiced by the author of the report, V.A. Panchaluga, during the 26th conference on the transmutation of chemical element nuclei and ball lightning. It seems to me that dark hydrogen is still ill-suited for the role of pest. Conclusion. Atoms are unable to exist without receiving energy from the ether. Therefore, the shell-like model of the atom described in 6, 14 and 17, I'm going to go and look at one more paper, has the right to exist because it allows one to explain where the energy for vital activity of atoms of matter come from, and many effects. The torus-like model of the atom and its empty shell, which turns into a torus-like energy cluster, is indirectly confirmed by the photographic plate capture of exploding clusters, photo 4. Very interestingly, photos from clusters exploding on the surface of a cathode. Photo 5 shows geometry of the experiment. A package containing film lies on an SM14. Exposure time is 116 hours. Right. This particular structure here, the way that this is put together is essentially the same as Levengood's seed treatment. It's also, if I can find it, I don't have it here with me, it's also the same kind of structure that Dr. Alexander Parkhomov used to determine N radiation, which he says are based on relic neutrinos. Okay? Shishkin is arguing that inside atoms, they have a cluster of relic neutrinos, and that it is these that gets energized by the chi coming through. In the other paper, I'll see if I can find it, but essentially, in brief, it's all at about 1.96 Kelvin, the entire condensate, one wave function through the whole universe. The Akashic record, in my view, of relic neutrinos. It's the same wave function at all points through all matter at all points in the universe. An atom has a toroidal structure in which it is able to pull in a proportion of this relic neutrino condensate, And if the atoms are under-energized, they are re-energized to their ordinary orbits, and then the remaining slightly denuded relic neutrino condensate is ejected back into the condensate, and because it's so extremely close, it then gets back into sync and shares the energy through the universe. Okay? If the atom is overexcited, the shell of this relic neutrino and the electrons, it pushes that energy out and back and dumps it back into the relic neutrino condensate. That is the basis of maintaining the electrons in their orbit, according to Alexander Shishkin, Karols, and Dubovik. But can you imagine, if you will, that you have a toroidal system that's like a very, very large atom, and it is pulling such a massive flux into it in order for it to sustain itself, that this massive flux of relic neutrinos is forced, because it goes through ordinary atoms anyway, because it's neutral, it overexcites those atoms, so that the electrons are overexcited such that they can't interact in the normal way that an electron interacts in a chemical bond, in a metal bond, in an ionic bond, like in water. So, in a metal, it turns to jelly, like in the Hutchison effect, or in telekinesis, in the spoon bending. And it slips on the crystal grain boundaries, as is observed with microball lightning, once it's formed, and actually transmutes the atoms, in the case of Matsumoto's work. In the case of the water spout, it's over-energizing those ionic bonds such that you get water gas. And I believe, and I've said it before, I think vibratory cavitation based systems that produce HHO, Brown's gas, but in particular, Dr. Roy Shinamaza's vibratory HHO based generator, it, in the process of producing cavitation spots, is not only oxygenating the water for clusters to be bound to it, but it has the cavitation structure and the vorticity in that, such that it is also producing the observed buckyball-like structures of water gas that are not able to, connect to each other because of the way they arrange themselves. This is what Malcolm Bendall calls plasmoids, and they can be of two types, with all the negative ends sticking out, or the positive ends sticking out. But if they're all positive on the outside, they're all going to reject each other. Or if they're all negative on the outside, they're going to reject each other, because light charges, they separate. So they become a water gas, but they're actually what Matsumoto observed with his $1 million mass spectrometer. They observed quantizations of these clusters of water molecules, such that they were arranged so that if you did the maths, they turned out at different kind of like buckyball-like structures. Okay, and so I think that's kind of what's going on. Whether there's a kind of vortex stuck in the center there with a collection of bound energy to oxygen, electrical energy in a vortex, maybe. And so that is kind of what we've got going on here. He does, so you can actually see here the distance between the two plates here. Okay, I will link to the other paper, because I think I want to go on to show the paper by Levingood, which I've done notes on. So are there any questions at this stage? Yeah, geodesic structures, that's right, Martin Ansel. But he actually showed that they were regular scale intervals, and so that's what's kind of going on here. Okay, so let's see if we can do this. And I think you'll have a few aha moments in here. I think it's going to be quite special. So thank you very much to Levingood and P. Talbot. And also, I would like to extend another thank you to Jeffrey Wilson who reached out to me, and I think it's his work that digitized these papers so that we have the ability to review them now. So thank you for that work, and you can go to his www.iccra.org/levengood/levengood.htm to review these at your leisure. Okay, let's see if we can get this so it's a decent way to review it. Okay, so dispersion of energies in worldwide crop formations. The author is W.C. Levengood and Nancy P. Tolbert. And she is the T in the Tolbert. The B was the chappie that we looked at last week. These findings reported here lend further support to the decade of research which suggests that over 95% of worldwide crop formations involved organized ion plasma vortices that deliver lower atmospheric energy components of sufficient magnitude to produce significant bending, expansion, and the formation of unique expulsion cavities in plant stem pulvini. Don't let me get away with not going into a technical paper about pulvini, how they work, and then tying it back to what we said earlier, because I think you're going to recognize how it's going on. As well as significant changes in seedling development. Here we demonstrate that in a number of formations, quantitative node alterations can be directly related to fundamental concepts of electromagnetic energy absorption through the atmosphere. Also, in a detailed field study of simulated crop formations, we show that over-fertilization or gravitropism cannot account for observed physiological alterations. In addition, we demonstrate that details of flattened, intertwined crop patterns can be described by the application of fluid dynamics principles governing the interaction of rectilinearly moving vortex pairs. What you're going to see in this will corroborate what I believe is the most important image that I was able to capture out of the Binzhen Huang DHX2 reactor analysis. If you remember those braided structures, we'll come back to that. Introduction. New findings reported here augment an ongoing investigation initiated in the late 1980s when samples taken from crop formations in wheat fields in southern England were first sent to the laboratory. Crop formations are flattened, swirled areas of plants, most often found in fields commercially grown cereal plants such as wheat, barley, or oats. These flattened areas of the crop are often interspersed with areas of standing, apparently unaffected plants. The overall effect of being recognizable geometric patterns of considerable intricacy and dramatic effect. Although simple flattened circles have been reported occasionally in southern England since the 1600s, by the mid-1960s they were increasing in number, and by the late 1980s not only numbered in the hundreds each summer, but had reached a level of design complexity which included not only circles and rings, but triangular and rectangular areas with associated pathways, often reaching 1 to 125 meters in length or diameter. Most of these formations exhibited a number of features which had the farmers and local landowners mystified as to their causation. During the 1993 growing season, the British news media initiated a story subsequently circulated worldwide. So it could be 1993 that we saw Matsumoto's news article, because it went worldwide. And that would tie in with the 1994 photo in the back of this photo album. Subsequently circulated worldwide that crop formations were the product of vandals. This assumption that all crop formations were man-made was not only accepted by much of the general public, but also apparently by the majority of scientists, in spite of the fact that there were absolutely no objective evidence presented to support such an idea. In fact, quite the opposite situation prevailed. Although not yet published in 1993, considerable data had been analysed in the laboratory, which conceptually offered a more sound and scientifically rigorous explanation. By 1994, over 80 crop formations had been sampled from USA, Canada, Australia and England, and these plant specimens had been examined and analysed in detail at the Pinelandia Laboratory at Grass Lake, Michigan, USA. By the time these results were published in the scientific literature, Levengood 1994, it was clear that the plants from more than 95% of the sampled events revealed either single or multiple anomalous and readily apparent structural alterations. In general, these consisted of significant enlargements in the internal cell wall pit structures. Enlargements in the internal cell wall pit structures. If you had a mechanism by which water ionic bonds would rearrange themselves or weaken, then you could expect that to go to a form of water gas, and potentially that would cause internal pressure on the cells. This does not require microwave heating. I'm not saying that's not happening, but I'm saying we've observed things that are able to extract water or jellify things that might not necessarily need it to be thermal heat going on. In general, these consisted of significant enlargements in the internal cell wall pit structures, expanded and deformed stem pulvini, and gross embryonic malformations. Not one of these clearly anomalous plant alterations had been mentioned, much less explained by the proponents of the Vandal theory. Nor can they be accounted for by the supposed methods employed to create crop formations, though claims made by the self-described Vandals. One remarkable feature of plants within crop formations, which upon laboratory examination displayed retarded or completely terminated embryo or seed. So here we go. Displayed retarded or completely terminated embryo or seed development, was the fact that the somatic tissue and external appearance of the plants were normal, thus producing a situation which cannot be explained by ionizing radiation or chemicals, both known to alter development within somatic tissues. In addition, seeds taken from flattened plants in the formations regularly disclosed either increased or decreased seedling growth. These changes were closely associated with a particular growth stage at the time the crop formation energies became evident in the field. At the present time, more than 250 crop formations have been examined in a growing list of countries as the phenomenon becomes more widely recognized and reported. Not only does the research reported here verify earlier observations, it also presents quantitative evidence supporting the hypothesis of the involvement of complex plasma vortex energies as the causative process behind crop formations. Is everyone with me? Materials and methods. Plant material. Procedures for collecting plant material from crop formations have focused on obtaining sample sizes sufficient for statistical analysis and the sampling of plant tissue at a number of sites both within and outside the flattened areas. Because the vast majority of crop formations examined in the laboratory have been in cereal grain crops, these species will be referred to when discussing the stem node analysis. At a given sampling site within the formation area or at a control location, a group of 15 to 20 plants are excised at around ground level. The field workers give each sample set a simple code number and carefully designate its location on a diagram of the formation. If the plants are moist and not at harvest maturity, they are dried down before shipment. This is of particular importance in the case of plants taken in foreign countries where shipping times can be from 10 to 14 days, thus allowing the build-up of severe mold in plants which have not been properly dried. Analysis of stem pulvini. The most reliable and consistent node length data are obtained from apical and penultimate pulvini, with the direction of measurement along. So I think penultimate is just below the seed head, and I think apical is, I think, down by the ground, but maybe I'm not right with that. With the direction of measurement along the vertical and longitudinal axis of the stem. The length of each node in a sample set is determined by using a microscope with a low magnification 6 times, a stem section 3 to 4 centimeters in length containing the node region is placed beside a machinist scale graduated to 0.5 millimeters intervals. The length estimated to the nearest 0.1 millimeter is referenced from the dark lateral lines of tissue demarcated, located at the basipetal and acropetal boundaries of the pulvinous region. Okay. Method of examining gravitropic responses. This might take some time, so I think people can read this. So these are the methods used. The responses in plants. In control studies where maturing cereal grain plants are placed in a horizontal position, a process of vertical recovery is initiated. This is the gravitropic nature, so it tries to right itself. The effects of which can be observed in just a few hours after positioning. Excellent time-lapse photography, blah, blah. This gravitropic response is generally believed to be associated with the vertical movement of this chemical to the lower sides of the stems, where it locally increases cell growth rates, thus producing an upward bending of the horizontal plant stems. At the stem growth nodes, this gravitropism effect produces a bending and lengthening of the pulvinous region, which in the case of crop formation plants would be independent of the external energies. Okay, so there's two different things here on the penultimate nodes. This is, I think, below the seed heads. We've got different lengths here, I guess, and these are blown out ones. So, yeah, upright, these are control plants, and then these are typical expulsion cavities in penultimate nodes from plants within the flattened area. Wheat crop formation in the Utah, USA, August 96. Now, if you heated the water in there, yes, it could burst out. But if you made the water so that it couldn't bind itself ordinarily in the way that it ordinarily does, and it turns to water gas, then it would produce pressure and it would burst out. So either way, you would end up with bursting out. But in one case, it's not cooking the plant at the same time. I think that's very important when you think about seeds. Okay, the non-cooking part. Okay, so there's the change in the lengths here, blah, 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 blah. They're working out the energies here. Okay, so I think this is where it becomes very interesting personally for me. And this is the vortex interactions within crop formations. In wheat stem nodes shown in figure 5, where's figure 5? That's 1. Let's go and have a look at figure 5. Figure 5. Oh, figure 5, look at this. Look at this, figure 5. Normal wheat nodes in upright controls and severe node expansion in flattened plants within a circular 1995 crop formation in the USA here. Very, very long extensions compared to the controls. Where are we? Okay. Vortex interactions within crop formations. And depict one of the most severe examples of pulvinous expansion examined in the laboratory. A total of 10 sample sets, blah, 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 taken within a circular region of 27 meters in diameter, disclosed node length increases ranging from 130 to over 200% relative to control plants. So node length increases of up to 200%. So that's like 3 times the original length. Relative to control plants with a number of 95 samples taken outside the formation. This high level of expansion was extended throughout the formation and was most evident in the apical nodes. In the penultimate nodes, so the apical I think are at the bottom, the penultimate at the top below the actual, I think I'm right in saying that, 65 to 85% of the formation plants contained expulsion cavities. None were found in the controls. These expulsion cavities are, as previously pointed out, another indication of high energies delivered very rapidly. In addition to the node alterations, this formation contained well-delineated linear paths forming a raised ridge of plants snaking in a sinusoidal pattern across the floor of the formation. Because of their usual linear extension, this ridge effect prompted the authors to examine the possible mechanisms of formation. From earlier work, Levengood 1994, the findings clearly suggested that the organization of crop formation arises from instability products within self-organized iron plasma vortices. And just before you go, Gordon, look at this diagram here. This is the ridge with the flat areas on either side, and he has a vortex and an anti-vortex. Vortex that way, anti-vortex that way, producing the ridge in the center line as it's moving. Ridge formation within the flattened plant area of the crop formation at Blue Ball, USA. Diagram B proposes counter-rotating vortices which produced plant ridges in the region of active reverse flow. So it's going that way, it's going that way, it's pulling in there. This is going up in this direction, but it's kind of doing a reverse flow there. Absolutely spectacular. I've drawn diagrams or reference diagrams like this many, many times. From the familiar vortex appearance of the pattern in plants surrounding these ridges, so the ridge is there and they've got vortex patterns either side, it seemed reasonable to apply fundamental fluid dynamics theory and examine the ridge patterns from the standpoint of interacting rectilinear moving vortices. And here's a paper on those subjects. We might like to look into those. 1957, nice and old there. 1992. If a simple vortex filament aligned normal to the crop surface and having a core of constant rotation is considered, the velocity V1 here, V1, on the circumference is connected with the angular velocity Q. Okay, so the angular velocity is somewhere here. We need to go and look at these papers. This Teitgens 1957. Prandtl and Teitgens. It'd be great if we could find those. Let me just delete that and see if I can find that in the background here. Let's see. Does it have a name? Does it give me a reference? I don't see a reference. It's sad, but there we go. It's in there. Teitgens in 1957. There we go. Let me see if I can pull that up. It's in here. Right. So we are going to go here. And we're going to see if we can... talk amongst yourselves. Oh, it doesn't have it. I can't get it. See if someone can get that at their university. Oh no, it says no, that's the wrong one. A finite element model of unsteady cavitating fluid flow around a hydrofoil. Oh well, it's based on a hydrofoil. If a simple vortex filament aligned normal to the crop surface and having the core of constant rotation is considered, the velocity V1 on the circumference is connected with the angular velocity Q. There we go. Where blah, 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 blah. Okay. If a nearby vortex core approaches this vortex filament, its motion will be influenced by that of the neighboring system. If there are two mutually interacting vortices, the potential fields of velocity distributions may become superposable. In the case of two vortices rotating in a parallel direction and both with axes normal to the crop surface, the movements of their cores would have opposing velocity vectors. That is, their hydrodynamic interactions would cause the cores to move apart and in opposite directions. In this type of situation, their mutual intersections would not form ridges of piled plants. But if in the case of two interacting vortices with opposing rotations, as we observe here, blah, 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 where are we? Missed it here. With opposing parallel direction. But if in the case of two interacting vortices with opposing rotations, thank you very much, Black Tie, it's very kind of you. Rotations examined, the core movements V1, So V1 is here, and V2 here, the V2, are as shown in figure 6b in the same direction and form a closed system around the individual vortex cores and an open system around the mutually interacting core pair. At the region x0, the phase singularity, the center, at the region x0, midway between the vortices, the velocity is 1.5 times that in the open system, x1 and x2. So the vortice, the speed here is 1.5 times the velocity on the outside here, x1 and x2, okay? And is in the opposite direction to the core movement, okay? Thus, the ridges are formed in the region of very active reverse flow. The interior plasmas accompany the vortices in their rectilinear movement through the crop, whereas the surrounding air flows around them as if they were a rigid body system. A reduced pressure occurs in the x0 region, and this combined with the high velocity profiles would account for the plants being drawn upwards and forming a ridge of piled up plants behind the vortex cores. So saying at the absolute x0 there's a low pressure, okay? But then you have a faster bit here and here, okay? So the low pressure maybe is sucking things up here, and you have a faster bit to the side. And that accounts for raising up and then pushing it down that way. So I think this is really interesting. This description is very useful to understand what we've been observing over many, many years. That there is a depressurization going on in here, which is sucking stuff up, but there's also a forcing down from the side, which is twice that of the outer area here, okay? And you can understand how that would kind of propel itself forward and also suck stuff up, suck stuff from behind as well as propelling itself forward. Okay. Intricacies of geometric design. Although many crop formations with very irregular outlines have been attributed to wind damage or over-fertilization, we have determined that some types of... anyway, this talks about how you get straight lines. We dealt with that a little bit last week. Let me see if there's other stuff I want to talk about here. Okay. Okay. All right. So, Table 1. Putative energy components involved in the establishment of crop formations. 1. Properties. Ion plasma, self-organized through chaos mechanisms. Order ab chaos. Order ab chaos. Order out of chaos. That is the Templars, rather, should I say, the Masons' phrase. Order out of chaos. So self-organized through chaos mechanisms. Ion plasma becomes self-organized through chaos. You need charge-separated material. It becomes exotic vacuum objects through turbulence. Okay? Dissipative system, far from equilibrium. Yes, you need the system to be far from equilibrium. Sensitive to initial boundary conditions. Of course, why would it not be? Composition of independently operating boundary conditions. 1. Microwaves produce transient heating, node expansion and expulsion cavities in the plant stem nodes. I'm arguing that you do get electromagnetic waves, but I'm also arguing that this vorticity, this depressurization in the ether is allowing for a flux to come through, and where that contacts, it is causing a concentration of the relic neutrinos in there that is causing the water to non-thermally turn to water gas and or clusters of water gas. Electric fields produced by charge separation in plasma vortices influence embryo development and seedling growth. Now, I'll go into this in a bit detail if it's mentioned, but you can go and read about Levengood's work. What they're saying is that if you have a seed that is exposed to this effect early in its development cycle, there's kind of like a little thing that holds around where the germ of the seed is, the embryonic seed, okay? And you'll see this if you open a bean pod open, there'll be a little bean in there, and then it gets bigger and bigger, and then the pod eventually gives over all of its energy, and you end up with a crusty bean pod and then a big fat bean in there with all the juice ready to go, okay? So what I'm saying is, if you have the seed pod on the outside, they're saying that the steam forms, or whatever, the water is microwave heated in there, and it separates itself from the germination, the seed, not the germination of the seed, but the germ in there, the small part of the seed that's starting to form. So that the bit that transfers nutrients to the developing seed can't do its work, and so you get malformed seeds that do not germinate or do not germinate very well. What they also say, and you'll see this, we'll maybe come on to it, but if not, I'm just going to say it in brief now. They say that if you take seeds that are fully developed and you expose them, then you don't get this damage occurring. You have the seeds germinate faster. They all germinate at the same length, and we'll see this. And then, they're more resistant. Okay. Well, they've still got water content. The seed itself, like when I get a seed, if I put it's pretty dry, but it still has water content. And what I don't understand with this theory alone is why the seeds aren't damaged by the kind of microwave heating. Like, I can't imagine that if you get seeds from wheat seeds and you put them in the microwave for a bit of time, they're going to suddenly germinate better. I can't imagine that. Okay, even if they're fairly dry. If they're very dry, maybe, I don't know, but anyway, I think the water expansion and the bending can be explained by this. But when we get onto the actual pulvini and how that's flopping around, I actually think that it's changing the way that water is able to flow in the same way that easy water is able to flow, or a similar way, easier through capillaries. It's changing just like the Hutchison effect is causing the metal bonds to become weak and it turns to jelly and it has no structural integrity. I'm saying that the water that's in there, now I can show you the scientific papers and it would be fairly lengthy, and maybe I'll just reference them. I'll do this quickly. Basically, there are chemical changes in the pulvini that allow for basically a potential across the pulvini, across membranes, and water, like partially osmotic through osmosis and through the potential that's set up, transfers from one side of the pulvini to the other, allowing it to bend and go into a particular position. And what it does is it effectively causes more turgidity on one side than the other, and there's a transfer of the fluid. If you can imagine a scenario where the charge relationship in there is completely messed up, and or all of the water is made such that it can flow easily through these ordinarily kind of like unidirectional pores, and it just flows around, then the pulvini will have no rigidity at all. It'll just flop around. And then what will it do when it's in the vortex? When it's in the flux of the relic neutrinos with the air involved, quite possibly as well, because air is going to be moved along with this overall structure, it'll just flop in that direction. And when you remove this extra feeding of the energy to the water that's in there, then it's just going to stay in that position with the water being on whatever side that it flowed through to in the overall pulvini structure. So maybe I'll pull up some sort of cut down diagrams of what's going on in a pulvini. But essentially, this is what I'm saying. It's like a Hutchison piece of metal turning to a bit of jelly, right? and being influenced by the fields that are shifting around. In this case, it's not the metal bond that's becoming jelly-like, it's actually the ability of water to flow through cell membranes. It changes that such that it turns floppy and it just moves effortlessly. And just like we saw on the tornado causing the water spout, it has an event horizon where it's not affecting at all outside of that area, and it's affecting 100% inside that area, because that is, these things produce event horizons, several event horizons. Yeah, so Jeffrey Wilson has stepped in. Thank you very much, Jeffrey, for your time, for what you sent me. And I didn't really get to read through what you sent me earlier, but I'll have a review of that. And yeah, I think, Jeffrey, we should probably have a conversation. Maybe we could have a Zoom call and we could discuss and chew the fat. No. Jeffrey, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that he's saying that they don't have to bend at the pulvini. I'm saying absolutely they don't. I started off by talking about this guy in Russia where he's got whole tree trunks in an area of long-lived luminous objects where the whole tree trunks are bent, right? But they don't have the pulvini, okay? Different plants don't have pulvini, but I'm just saying that if you are affecting the way fluid is able to move around within the plant, or you're changing the whole rigidity of water and how it interacts in the structure of the plant, and that it flows where this particular flux of relic neutrinos is flowing within the overall magnetohydrodynamic structure, then it will cause all kinds of plants to flow with it. Oh, he said correct. Okay, all right. Convective stability, motion of grasses inside the vortex. Convective turbulence may occur internally and from external weather conditions. Influence of Earth's natural electric field locally. This can vary from 1 to 100 volts centimeter or higher in turbulent weather. Magnetic fields produced by motion of ions and electrons inside plasma. Variation in Earth's magnetic field locally. Thermal gradients inside and outside vortices. Okay. Okay, and they're explaining this particular structure forming here. Conclusions. As data accumulates from the laboratory, investigation of crop formation plants sampled at quite diverse geographic locations, it becomes apparent that concept of organized ion plasmas as the guiding energetic force behind crop formations has the empirical foundation. I agree that ion plasmas are what initiate this process. Something that's never been discussed, which we're familiar with, is doing a lot of the weird stuff, it's the same stuff that does the weird stuff in Lena and in the Hutchison effect and in water spouts. The repeatedly documented lengthening and bending of crop formation plant stems nodes, which have been sampled in formations just hours to a few days after their appearance in fields. The frequent incidence of expulsion cavities, the fact that node length changes have been found to agree with the model of electromagnetic energy absorption based on the Beer-Lambert principle. I mean, it's it gets more concentrated to the center. Yeah, okay. It's true, whatever theory. All indicate the involvement of the intense plasma energy is delivered very rapidly during the crop formation process. In addition, a control study designed to evaluate the possible causative mechanisms for these observed plant anomalies, over-fertilization and or gravitropism, clearly revealed that neither factor contributes significantly to the documented plant alterations. The further recognition that certain details of flattened intertwined crop lay, such as the well-delineated sinusoidal ridge pattern in 6A, can be explained as a result of two interacting plasma vortices with opposing rotation impacting the crop surface, adds significant credibility to the proposed hypothesis that thermodynamically unstable ionospheric non-meteorological plasma systems are the causative agency. I do think this can be caused in that mechanism, but I think probably the ones that I saw
were technologically produced, not with boards and string, but with things that my father showed me 6 years previously. And I don't think they had them for the first time showing them to me and my siblings. I think they'd known about how to produce these things for some time. And if you're flying these things around and you suddenly move across a crop and you see that it's leaving a trail, you go, oh, we can do something with that. I think probably something like that happened. Additionally, supporting evidence for this hypothesis has been obtained from rather unexpected sources, one example being magnetic glaze, material discovered in 1993. Iron oxides which had literally heat fused onto soil and plant leaves. If something is very, very hot, I know they talk about, without saying it, the Leidenfrost effect, but that means you've got to have a lot of water coming out in order to produce that steam barrier, but then it's steam, and then is it not going to damage the plant, and blah, 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 blah. You don't need any of this to understand that the iron-rich crenellated spheres, yes, they can be coming from meteorites. Yes, they can be coming from concentration from the ground, from any other source of iron, or they could be actually synthesized like they were with carbon arc rods underwater with oxygen dissolved in the water from Sundaresan and Bockris at Texas A&M in the 1990s, replicating George Osawa. They produced iron. They didn't observe the form of that iron, but we've observed the form of that iron in a plasma system in the NOVA experiments. Those things can be formed in water. We've observed the iron-rich crenellated spheres formed in water. It is a plasma-based system, but it's just the immense magnetic fields that are produced and this disruptive chi that I believe is both it's causing iron, let's say, in the specks of iron that you see in the normal aluminium foil or aluminum foil that we used in ultra experiments. There's little specks of iron in there. Those, you can actually see a progression. Actually, I should do that. We have a progression of the development of an iron-rich crenellated sphere where you actually start to see these iron pieces accumulating together into twisted, knotted structures. I've shared those before, but I haven't really spoken through it in the way that's necessary to make it very clear. These twisted, knotted structures, you can imagine that they get twisted and twisted and twisted until they become ball, but they become coherent as the structures are resonantly driven. But it's not extremely high temperatures. It's not, I mean, it's in water, right? It is raising the temperature of the water, and maybe there are extremely high temperatures in there in places because that's producing the excess heat, maybe in the cavitation systems of Kladoff, of Griggs, of Schaefer, of Binger and Huang. Maybe. However, what we see is even in the work of Shishkin in his cavitator, it's pulling that iron. It's doing it in the thunderstorm generator. It's pulling that iron and it's arranging it into these iron-rich crenellated spheres. And so the source of iron might be synthesized or it may be aggregated, but it's field and coherence that is allowing them to produce these spheres, which are ferromagnetic. And they don't rust. They just don't rust. They are shiny for a long time. Thank you very much, above all things. Yeah, like round ball or guts of brain. Yes, just like that. Based on the physical, chemical, and meteoritic nature of this iron oxide coating, it's only meteoritic because it just has these particular elements in there. But anyway, I think my computer's not liking this. Okay, there we go. And they're saying that, okay, that's right, fine, that's fine. All right, now I want to look at the patents, and I want to talk about, this is the patent of Levengood, deep dive into that, and I want to talk about not only the opportunity, now that the patent is expired, the opportunity for improving seed yield. Okay, I'll say it. This is very simple. No, I'm gonna get some imagery first. I'm gonna get some imagery so you know what I'm talking about. It's gonna be easier if I do that. Okay, so this is on bltresearch.com. I think this is a good place for people to have a look at this, and it talks about the plant abnormalities and So bltresearch.com. Okay. And we've looked at work from B, Levengood, and Talbot, I think it is. Okay, they are the people. The physical changes listed below, documented in crop circle plants by Michigan biophysicist Levengood, have been determined by evaluating hundreds of sample plants, both downed and standing, taken from inside the overall perimeter of each formation against hundreds of control plants. So this is what we've talked about here. Okay. On the microscopic level, abnormal enlargement of cell wall pits and bract tissue, a thin membrane which surrounds the seed head and through which nutrients pass developing seed were found. Right, so if you damage the bract tissue early on in the flowering of the plant or in the development of the seed, it's not going to be able to transfer those nutrients and make a really good seed. It's not going to be able to germinate potentially, or it's not going to be able to grow very quickly. It's not going to be a very big seed, is it? So, and I think that doesn't matter whether it's microwave boiling of the water or it's chi overexcitement of the water and for causing the water to separate, and which I believe is part of the mechanism that the wind hex is desiccating food or desiccating wet stuff. Okay. This examination utilizes the optical microscope and is quite time consuming, and although useful in the early exploratory stages of the research, was replaced when equally reliable criteria were subsequently discovered. Enlarged both laterally and longitudinally plant stem nodes, the fibrous knuckle-like protuberances found spaced along the plant stem beneath the seed head, technically called pulvini. Although these nodes are sometimes enlarged both laterally, they are fatter, and longitudinally they are stretched. Extensive laboratory work has determined that this is the node elongation, the stretching, that is the permanent effect caused by the formation energies. And so this is the parameter now used. So apical node, I think that's the one at the bottom. This is the apical node is the first node beneath the seed head, so I got that wrong. Yeah, so the apical node is the first node below the seed head, and they're really long, and these are mean nodes. These are controls where they're not very long at all. In some crop formations, the energy system involved is intense enough to cause bending of the apical top node, although pronounced node bending is much more commonly found at the lower nodes of the plant stem. In a few cases, we have found severe apical node bending in conjunction with marked stretching of the node, as the example below illustrates. The node elongation cases is clearly in addition to that caused by the bending of the node tissues. Yet, you know, to me, if you're just boiling, it would kind of like go in every direction, unless I guess maybe if the cellulose or tubes in the pulvini were linear, it would maybe stretch it long ways before it blew it out. So maybe that's what's going on. But anyway, okay, so here we go. These are very, very stretched. These are not stretched in the control plants. 4 plants on the left from Italian crop circles show apical node elongation and slight bending. 2 apical nodes on the right are from controls. Yeah, so no stretching and stretching over here. Okay. Marked bending of the plant stem nodes, which can occur at all of the nodes in some cases, is most often observed in the 2nd, 3rd and 4th nodes down towards the bottom of the stalks. It does occasionally occur in the 1st or apical node beneath the seed head. Usually this bending, if determined, can be determined to be significant after ruling out natural plant recovery processes, is in the range of 45 to 90 degrees, and considerable care must be taken to not confuse this node bending with 2 well-known plant recovery processes: phototropism, looking for the light, and gravitropism, adjusting to the Earth's gravitational field. Okay. Depending on the growth stage of the plant at the time it is downed, whether it is young or old, and in the species of the crop involved, these natural recovery processes, phototropism and gravitropism, begin to take effect within days. Therefore, node bending can only be understood as significant when it is known how old the effective crop was at the time the crop circle occurred, and particularly how many days have elapsed since then. Young barley, for instance, begins recovery to the upright position almost immediately and will show significant node bending within a week. Young wheat tends to recover slightly more slowly, and mature crops may not reorient themselves at all, depending on the amount of vigor inherent in the plants. But when crop circles are known to have been formed during a specific time period and are found within 24 to 48 hours, and significant node bending 40 degrees plus is observed, this is an effect that can be attributed to the causative energy system. In some cases, canola rapeseed plants have been observed to be bent at full 180 degrees. So here we go, full 180 degrees C. In fact, I think I did see a crop circle. One more crop circle in my life, and it was in canola. Anyway, bending at the base of the plant stem is a totally separate condition, which is thought by many to indicate that any formation in which it is found is genuine, not mechanically flattened. This type of bending is found at the very bottom of the stem where it comes out of the earth and is often quite pronounced. Okay. Because you've got a impedance mismatch between the ground and the air above, two different mediums, you can imagine that the maximum flux of relic neutrinos that's coming in like it did in that water spout would occur on this boundary layer. And so I would understand that that would be where you would expect the most bending to occur. And, you know, I don't think this has the Pulvini there. It's just bending the crops. Although this particular parameter has not been scientifically evaluated, it is known that mechanical flattening with planks, boards, and human feet of many plants, particularly canola above, will snap or break the plant stems. Okay, fantastic. Rather than the so Jeffrey Wilson has said that the ICCRA, they've developed a testing rule for measuring node elongation. Excellent. To account for phototropism and gravitropism. Okay. A summer progress in cereal crops in which the majority of the crop formations occur dry down, the plants become less and less elastic, making bending at the stem base in these crops perhaps more significant later in the season. Expulsion cavities, well, we've discussed those, and you can see an example here, and here's a close-up example of them. Okay. These are in older, mature plants. In mature wheat, these expulsion cavities. This is in mature barley plants, broken out there. Now, this is where it becomes very, very interesting. Stunted and malformed seeds and germination effects. There are 4 basic changes to the seeds and germination capability in crop circle plants documented so far. These radically different reproductive effects depend upon the species of crop involved, the growth phase of the plants at the time the crop circle occurs, and the composition and intensity level of the energy system involved, which appears to differ slightly within each event as well as from event to event. If the crop circle occurs prior to anthesis, the flowering of the plant, and the development of the seed, the somatic, non-reproductive tissue of the plant will continue to develop normally, but the seed development ceases or is impaired. Normally formed glooms have been found which are totally devoid of seeds. Absolutely no seeds in this. Crop circle seeds head right has no seeds due to the destruction of plants' reproductive capacity, found only when crop circles occur in very immature plants. Okay, so this is what I was talking about earlier. And we could possibly use this. And this is what I'm going to propose. In Levingood's paper, he talks about using the process on late, well-developed seeds to encourage them to grow. Okay? Here you can see if you use it on immature seeds, you can cause them to not produce seeds. I'm going to propose that if the wind hex really does work in the same way as we see in tornadoes, as we see in water spouts, we're seeing without the charge separated particles, we don't get the real effect going on in the Wintex so far. Okay, but if we got the charge separated particles in there, because we're injecting steam through a nozzle and it's doing the same effect as in the Armstrong electrostatic boiler, and then it goes in with that, all of that charge separated material into that highly turbulent, chaotic system, and it produces the overall structure that we require. Okay, if we do that, then at the disruption zone, we could be able to pull that chi up in the same way that these systems are doing it. And could we use what we are seeing here in a beneficial way for farmers? Could we use it? I think we could, and this is what I propose. Typically, when you are getting ready a field for putting in plants, you'll kill everything in there. And do you know what farmers often use? They use a non-specific, broad-spectrum herbicide like glyphosate. And this is not good because it causes cancer. That's been shown, particularly in the farmers that are applying it. And it's not good to have glyphosate as something that is able to come into your diet. It's just not good. Okay? What if the field's got all this weeds on there? You actually use like a kind of Wintex and you drag it behind your tractor and it kind of processes the field. Now, you could maybe kill the plants like that. You probably suck them up actually, and you desiccate them. And in one way, when you're getting a plant ready, a field ready, you can plow in the current weeds. But what do you do about the seeds? Well, here's the thing. Sometimes you're leaving a field to go fallow, right? And it has loads of weeds that grow there, and that's great, and so on. But what if you applied it to a field where you were trying to cause all of those weeds to produce seeds that would not germinate? Or they would germinate, but they would not be very good at germinating. Or they wouldn't produce a viable seed. You wouldn't be applying a chemical to it. You would just be making it incapable of producing viable seeds. And could this be a way of treating fields without chemicals by over-energizing the seeds, causing them so that they can't produce seeds, and without having the risks of glyphosate? Yes, and Ken Pratt has just made the point that the paper states that the effects are different depending on the species, age, so the overall weed killer might only be a selective killer. Yes, Ken. Yes, that's an absolutely brilliant point. By spinning up your toroidal vortex generating device and having the disruption zone on your weed patch, you might be actually able to selectively prevent certain seeds from forming. Yeah. This not just what he's found. I think this has a, because we have the Wintex in development. If you can prevent weeds being as good at growing, or prevent them from producing seeds. I mean, it's like I have this thing every year where I have these dandelions in my garden. And I try and encourage the kids not to blow the seeds everywhere. But like I'm always pulling up the dandelion flowers before they get a chance to produce seeds. Well, if I had a device that I could just go around the garden and just allow the flower to bloom, but for it to be unable to produce viable seeds, then very quickly I could deal with, yeah, Alex Del Castillo. It's an agricultural version of Revive Machine. So Jeffrey Wilson says, you might have to test to understand how what you're proposing would affect mycorrhizome. Yeah. I think also there might be some issues with mushrooms. I love absolutely love mushrooms, and I don't know. No, that's not. Yeah, okay. So affect the. You're talking about something different there. Yeah. So I think it's essentially weed sterilization. You see, my father used to buy a lot of. My father used to grow mushrooms, but we also used to use mushroom compost, and we would have it sterilized, that mushroom compost, using steam injection. So they would put, hot these nozzles in, and then they would pass steam through the material, and it would cause the mushroom compost to the mycelia in there, which is separate, I know, to be destroyed, and any weeds that might be in there to become unviable. I wonder if this might just be an easier technology, and I think it's worth a shot. I think it's worth a... Yeah, exactly, Nick Knock. A Roundup substitute. Roundup is the commercial name for glyphosate. Yeah. I think by dialing it up and down, I think Ken Pratt's made a very good observation here. You might be able to use what Levingood has identified to selectively denature the ability of certain plants to produce viable seeds. Okay, all right. Moving on. When crop circles occur at a slightly later growth stage in young crop where the seed is still forming, the developing embryos fails to grow normally. These seeds will be visually stunted, smaller and way less than their controls, and will exhibit reduced or repressed germination. Here, the reproductive capacity of the plant has been compromised. So, these are stunted and dehydrated maize seed on the right. They don't look very good. These occur when embryos are already formed or partially formed when the crop circle occurs. Right, now here we go. Control maize seedlings at 7 days. These are the control. They all look pretty good, varying lengths of height. Here are the ones that were in development when the crop circle occurred. They look pretty ropey. I'd be upset if I was planting those, right? Okay. And this is at 7 days. This looks a lot... if I planted these, I'd be happy. If I planted those, I would be unhappy. Now, this is where it becomes very interesting. When crop circles occur in more mature plants, where embryo is fully formed or nearly so, the seeds will again be visually stunted and will weigh less than normal. But the effects on reproduction vary. One effect observed has been an alteration in normal growth habit of developing seedlings. In species which have normal variability of growth at particular stages, this variability has been lost, with the result being that all of the germinating seeds exhibit synchronized growth. When crop circles occur in more mature plants, where the embryo is fully formed or nearly so, the seeds will again be visually stunted and will weigh less than normal, but the effects on reproduction vary. Okay, so here we go. Control seedlings, 12-day wheat, showing normal variation of growth rate height for this particular species at this stage of development. And here, formation seedlings, 12-day wheat, showing induced synchronization of growth. Synchronization of growth. What if you are producing an energy system that is taking chi, and the chi is condensing into a coherent condensate of chi, and that same coherent condensate is equally depositing itself to the maximum level in these nearly developed seeds? When they germinate, are they germinating at the same time and growing in synchronization? Because the thing that is driving them, the chi, the life force, the thing that is actually driving them, is all in sync. They're driven at the same time. Bose-Einstein condensate plants, says JK Philly fan. Yes. Is that what's happening? Yes, Ken Pratt says, synchronous gravity, time well. Right. I like it. Weed Nerd said DWC. I like the name, Weed Nerd. I'm not sure we're talking about the same weeds, are we? Finally, when crop circles occur in mature plants with fully formed seeds, these seeds often exhibit a statistically significant, massive increase in growth rate and vigor, with growth rate up to 5 times the rate of the control seeds. Further, these seeds can tolerate extreme stress, lack of water and or light for considerable periods of time without apparent harm. Right, here's the center, here's the edge, and here is the control. So in this case, what I think is happening in this case, where you have mature seeds being influenced by the crop circle, a real crop circle, the chi is going into the seed. Now, Levingood says that there is this redox potential that is observable in the seed, and this causes certain aspects of the plant physiology to enable it to germinate faster and better. Shishkin is arguing that these clusters are actually the life force in things. Now, if you can imagine that you have in your seed kernel, in your seed body, the ability to store a certain amount of chi, of driving force, of thing that will enable your intent, and you load that to the max at a stage where the seed is fully formed. Everyone knows if you've eaten the corn on the cob, you know, there are some of the kernels are big and at the ends they're not so big, right? So some of them will have less physical matter in there. And therefore, if all of that matter can be energized and store more chi, okay, then when it's growing, that helps its intent to grow. Okay? So if you combine a situation where the seeds are growing and they're growing at the same rate, what you're doing is you are, in my view, enabling the seed to reach its genetic potential. Its genetic potential within the confines of the size of the seed that's actually there. Okay? So these things have profound potential improvement capabilities to farming. On the one hand, we've got the ability to manipulate the ability of weeds, potentially, with a technology that we're already working on. On the flip side, we've got the potential to perhaps enhance the growth rate of seeds. We might even be able to use a wind hex to improve seeds, but I don't know, it's going to turn it into flour most likely. So I think the method of Levingood is more controllable. It can be put on conveyors and so on, and we're going to see that in a minute in more detail. So seeds that grow at the same time, they have the advantage that they don't shadow each other, right? If they grow fast, then they can outgrow weeds. If the weeds are denuded in their ability to grow or they don't germinate, your quid's in, right? I think you are giving all the life force that the seed itself can handle within the capacity of its confines, and it will grow the best it possibly can do. Okay. The plant aberrations described above are thought to be caused by exposure of the plants to a complex atmospheric plasma energy system which is emitting heat, probably microwaves, in association with unusual electrical pulses and strong magnetic fields. The microwave component heats up the internal moisture of the plant stems. I do not agree with this necessarily. Even mature crops nearing harvest contain some moisture. I agree with that, but the moisture has water, and the water has things that can, you know, it's going to have oxygen in there. It can store this chi, turning it to steam. In younger crop where the external fibers are more elastic, the steam seeps out the nodes by stretching these fibers. In older crops where the external fibers are tougher and less elastic, the buildup of steam explodes from the nodes. The buildup of water pressure, of gas pressure rather, of gaseous water. creating the holes and subsequently found. The final effects on individual plants depends upon a number of factors, including the complexity and intensity level of the microwave component, or whatever, which varies in each event and from location to location with any group given crop circle. The modifying influence of the electrical pulses also involved, as well as the species, variety, and age of plants involved. They talk about where this comes from, the beginning to the end, the Beer-Lambert principle, blah, blah, blah. We talked about that the other day. Okay. Laboratory replication of the crop circle plant changes. Apical node, the first node beneath the seed head, elongation and expulsion cavities, holes blown out at the lower plant stem nodes have been induced in normal plants in laboratory by placing them in a commercial microwave oven. Yes, if you warm something up with water in a microwave, it's going to cause water gas. It's going to do that. It is microwave radiation here that is heating up the moisture inside the plant stem, which as it turns to steam and expands, either stretches the more elastic fibers at the top of the plant or blows holes through. Yeah, but my point is something that will make water gas will do exactly the same thing. The more positive plant changes, enhanced growth rate, increased yield, and increased stress tolerance observed in the laboratory and seeding growth from crop circle plants which were mature when the crop circle occurred have also been replicated in the laboratory. In 1998, W.C. Levengood and John Burke obtained a patent, this patent here, which we're going to look at, on equipment they developed which delivers an unusual electrical pulses to normal seeds. When you read what is in that patent, you will know that they are creating charge clusters. You will know it. And therefore, it is what's doing the job. Called the Mir process and carrying the registered trademark stress guard, this equipment creates organized electron avalanches. Look at that! Organized electron ion avalanches, which then formed organized plasmas to which seeds are exposed. Boom! I rest my case. Corn, tomato, carrot and many other seeds will, after exposure to the Mir stress guard process, show increased seedling growth rate and accelerated maturity, increased yield 25% to 35%, and substantial improvement in the ability to withstand typical plant stresses, lack of water and or sunlight. Numerous field trials conducted by multiple universities and international seed companies substantiated these results, and John Burke spent several years attempting to find a commercial application. Since John's death, the website he created describing in detail the Mir stress guard process and its results is no longer active, but is archived here. Okay, and it's pretty good actually. Is it archived still here? Yeah, it's archived here. Called it Proceeds. Proceed. The ability to replicate the laboratory many changes documented in the crop circle plants is a strong indicator that the NGs utilized in the lab are also involved in causative mechanisms in the field. In the field, the major question is where are these plasma systems originating and why? And that is it, and then we will go to the patent. Okay, so you can go, and I recommend having a look through this website here, but it's not being actively pursued, but I think with our new understanding, we can understand, in my view, better how this is happening, and we can do a very good job. But I think what he did was he really nailed it, and you'll see it in the patent in a minute. So I'm just going to go to the little boys' room, and I'll be back in a little while. I'm going to turn off my microphone as well.
Okay, so if someone has a question whilst I'm finding the patent here about an aspect of seed anomaly that occurs in crop circles, I'd be very, very happy to give my thoughts on it. I think this has immense potential for improving the human condition, and that is what this whole process has been about. So give me a second here. I have it somewhere. Not that patent. Not that patent. I've got a bunch of patents here. I'll just show a couple of images from ProSeedTech's website here. Different things done by different universities. Control at 9 days, hybrid. You can see in the hybrid field corn here, they're all pretty much the same length. So mere treated and untreated seeds can be quantified within days. Notice the dramatic differences between the seedlings, no matter the type of crop. So much more synchronized growth. And this is great because if you have synchronized growth, then you don't have a situation where one plant grows quickly and it shades the other plant, and so the small plant never gets enough light, and so it just dies and just never participates in your crop. So yeah, corn here, winter wheat. So several of these are really stunted from the control group. Yeah, this is bluegrass here, very, very strong here. This is drought resistance, so this looks a lot healthier than the control. This is tomatoes. They look pretty grim in the control here, but this one's obviously looks like it's done a lot better in terms of drought resistance. The thing about it is that people that like myself who grow plants, when you get a lot of leaf foliage, so it looks like there's more leaf foliage here and there's more foliage here, that actually prevents the ground from having as much evaporative losses. So just having more leaves not only causes the plants to be able to capture more energy from the sun and put it into the fruiting bodies, it also shades the ground so that any water that is on the ground, maybe from dew or from watering or from rain, has less evaporative losses. So you just all round you get a better crop. Okay, so that's that. I'm going to get the patent now. I'll focus on getting the patent because I have got it somewhere. Somewhere. Okay, let me try here. Da 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 da. Ken Pratt says, Bob, I missed if the mere plants were treated before planting or after. You're going to see in the patent. You're going to see in the patent. And so it will be abundantly clear.
Sorry for the delay here. I did actually note one. Okay. Okay, I've got it on Google Patents. Maybe that's the best place, I don't know. Okay. Right. This is on Google Patents. And it is method and apparatus for enhancing growth characteristics of seeds using ion electron avalanches. What do we have in EVOs? We have ions and electrons, don't we? Ion electron avalanches. Let's zoom into this a bit. Maybe we do it like that. Method and apparatus for enhancing growth characteristics. Okay, so Levingood here, and it's applied in 1996, so we are free to use it. It expired. It's already expired in 18th of September 2016. So come on. A method and apparatus for treating seeds with self-organized avalanches of electrons between electrodes 11 and 12. These are 11 and 12. As a cathode and an anode with seeds 13. These are our seeds here. There we go. Between the anode and cathode, or on the anode, apparatus circuit 200. This is a circuit. Where's our circuit 200? Is it this one? Yeah, this is the apparatus circuit. There we go. There's the circuit you need to build it. There we go. Right. In a box 20, provides simultaneous DC and AC between the electrodes, which creates an avalanche of electrons with which project into the seeds. These seeds must be stored before planting. So there's your answer. These seeds must be stored before planting. The seeds so treated have enhanced growth characteristics. Right. You will see that the method used by Suhas Ralkar in his reactor, his energy producing reactor, and in his nickel plating system was DC biased AC pulses. You will know that in the Vega experiments of Henk Uren, it's DC bias AC pulses. You should know that in the work of who is it? Bogdanovich at the Moscow Nuclear Physics Institute, where he's doing water vapor plasma discharge, or water flow plasma discharge, where he produces ball lightning and he produces monopole-like structures. And he produced long-lived plasmoids that live for 2 days, right? In this situation, he's got a DC bias and AC pulse. I believe that in the putative potential system of Andrea Rossi, he has a DC bias with an AC pulses, okay? And what this does is it allows a system to have a drift DC bias. So the electron clusters that are formed can drift from point A to point B in between pulses. And then you have an AC bias, which allows for breakdown of the dielectric in between and bunching of electrons with the turbulence to allow for clustering. Okay? So this is the basis of all of these systems. All of them. Okay? We know we make ball lightning in the Vega experiments. We know there is ball lightning made in the Bogdanovich et al. Work. Right? And that comes from the 1990s. It's early 2000s, lots and lots of work. This is old stuff, well documented for creating electron avalanches. Let's read the patent. A method for treating seeds to enhance growth characteristics of the seed, which comprises A, providing the seed between a pair of spread apart electrodes as an anode and a cathode, having a gap between them with seed or on adjacent to the anode. Okay, I'm reading the claims. I don't want to read the claims. I want to read the patent first. Sorry, let's not go straight there. Where's the rest of it? Where's the rest of it? Is it because I've zoomed in too much? It's not going to give me the rest of it. Sorry, there we go. All right, we'll do that. Field of invention. Sorry, it's a little bit small, but hopefully you can read it. The present invention relates to the method of an apparatus for treating seeds, thereby reproducibly enhancing the rate and uniformity of seed germination, early growth, root growth, maturity, and yield in food crops and other plants. These results are achieved by exposing seeds or growing plants to uniform, spontaneously organized pulses of ion electron avalanches. Right. If I'd had more time this week, I'd have arranged all of these charts that are in this in the right orientation with the notes on them, and I might do that anyway next week in a presentation, which I'll do a quick summary of. But I want to get through this now. One important aspect is allowing a period of several weeks storage before planting, thereby allowing internal biochemical changes to take place at the cellular level within the seed. The present invention also relates to a quality control method and apparatus for selecting optimal treatment parameters with the avalanches of ions and electrons for each variety of seed. Well, if you had enough systems to do this, a bit of heuristics would end up with the same answer. Just saying. You just need to create a lot of these devices. And I think we have the skills to do this, guys. I think we do. Let's take charge of our destiny. Description of related art. Almost since the discovery of commercial use of electricity, experimenters have tried to electrically influence plant growth. Various prior art examples have claimed positive results for exposing growing plants to electrical stimulation in situ. So they're doing electroculture. They're trying to stimulate the plants whilst they're growing. A wiring network over a field of growing crops is not cost effective or practical on a commercial scale, and such techniques have not been adopted by farmers. Some prior art experimenters have attempted to avoid the prohibitive cost of wiring a field by applying electromagnetic treatments to seeds before planting. Despite reports of increased growth and, in some cases, increased yield, these results have proven difficult to repeat and have not achieved commercial use. There's this patent here by Parry. It describes the use of oscillating DC voltage to treat seeds to increase germination of the seeds. There is no indication of improved plants. Jonas, with this patent, 1955, and others exposed seeds to high-frequency oscillating fields between 30 MHz and microwave range, claiming faster and more uniform germination. Jonas stated that the work of others along similar lines have been impossible to repeat and confirm. The patent describes only increased germination of the seeds. Here. In these patents, Amburn exposed seeds to magnetic fields, claiming increased germination rate as an effect. Because of unreliability and non-reproducibility, none of these methods have achieved widespread commercial acceptance. Now, Levengood goes into his own patents, which have not been so successful. And he says that the US patent from 1974 of Levengood. So he's not a fly-by-night guy. This guy has been trying to achieve this for some time. He describes an apparatus for genetically altering plant cells using combined electrical and magnetic fields. The electric field is static. There was an alteration in the growth of seeds, but the method was not repetitively effective from batch to batch of seeds. Another patent to Levengood, he's still trying in 1974, describes a method for testing seeds for viability by measuring pre-germination tissue conductivity. Schiller, in 1987, describes treating seeds to disinfect them with low-energy electrons using an electron gun. The radiation dosages are quite high, and the acceleration voltage is between 25 and 75 kilovolts. The use of high-energy ionizing radiation can cause damage to chromosomes and resultant genetic change, which poses complications for use in open fields. This is not good. There is no indication that the growth of the plant is enhanced on a reproducible basis. In 1988, Yoshida describes using pulsating direct current to prevent mold. The voltages were 300 to 20,000 volt DC, which were pulsed. This method is not practical on large scale and results were variable. In 1992, Liboff described the use of magnetic fields with plants in soil. This method is not practical. Levengood in 1994 describes genetically transferring DNA between plants using a constant DC voltage. This is also described in bioelectrochemistry and bioenergetics in 1991. These are techniques for producing genetically altered plants. Other patents of general interest are these. This one relates to microwaves. This one relates to ultrasound. This relates to magnetic treatment. One system which used AC ripple in a DC current to produce pulses is Tellefsen in 1992. Pulses of ions were produced from wire brush emitters to flood growing plants in a field. This method is not used with seeds. Now, this type of approach is what I would suggest to do with water that you then water on the seeds. That's, in my view, much more effective. But you would need to treat the water first before you do that to optimize it. There is clearly a need for a reproducible and reliable method for treating seeds to enhance their growth characteristics. The prior art methods have not met this need, and since no such method is used commercially. Summary of the invention. It is therefore an object to the present invention, blah, 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 blah. Right, brief description of the drawings. Figure 1A, this one here, this one here, and I'm gonna, no, it's not gonna do that. Brief description of the drawings, is it gonna let me do that? It's gonna let me do that, is it gonna let me do it? Yes, it is. Okay, 1A. Schematic view of the apparatus of the present invention for producing controlled spontaneous electrostatic pulses which form the organized electron avalanches between the anode and electrode supporting seeds and so on. Figure 1B here. That's not figure 1B. Where's figure 1B? No, that's 8B. Why are they not in order? Where's 1B? Don't know where 1B is. This is the graph. Okay. Is a charted graph showing organized electron avalanches produced in the apparatus Fig 1A with different DC voltages. Oh, this is here. One of these. Where is it? That's 1. Okay. Where's 1B? That's maybe it's 1.6. Okay, that's not very good, is it? Oh, 2B, there we go. 2A, where's 1B? Is it right at the end? 4, it's all over the place. 3A, 2B, oh, come on. 8A, it's all over the place. Why are they not in order? You know what? I'm going to look at the patent. I'm going to download the patent. It's probably going to be easier. Download PDF. Where's your diagrams here? Are they in order? No, they're not in order here, are they? Yes, they are. Yes, they're in order. 1B. No, there is no 1B. Sorry about that. Doesn't appear to be a 1B. There's a 2B, there's a 4, 6, 7, 8, 9B, 10, what's that, 11, 13, 14, there's a lot of figures, 17, okay, goes to 18, I don't know what 1B is, I don't see 1B, I see 2B, I see 2A, 1B, there we go. This is what we're looking for. 1B, right. Okay, so as you increase the kilovolts here, quite logically, you would imagine that the rate of the pulses of the discharge increase for the avalanches. Okay, all right. Makes sense. We found 1B finally, good. 2A, 2B, 2C are graphs showing growth differences in tomatoes, pepper. Is it going to allow me to zoom? I'm going to zoom in it like this so everyone can read it. No, not like that. No, not like that. Oh, it's in a different page, is it? Okay, there we go. Oh, come on. Leave me alone. Stop it. Oh dear. I'm not having a lot of luck here. Yeah, just stay over there. That's what I want. This is why I wanted to have this in a nice presentation for you, but sorry, not there. So 2A, 2B and 2C are graphs showing the growth differences in tomatoes. So 2A, this is in tomatoes, I guess. So different voltages here produce different effects. So you get a negative effect at 10 and 15. You get a positive effect at 5, 20, 25 and 30. And that is in tomatoes. This is in pepper. So yeah, 5 kilovolts. 5 kilovolts looks pretty good in most of these situations. 5 kilovolts here is good in carrot. And so on. Okay, germination data was taken at the, so Fig 1A with seeds for 35 and 36 days. So 1A, where's 1A? 1A. Okay, 1A is going to be lower down, isn't it? Because it would be. That's figure 8A, 8B. Oh dear. One A. Where's 1A? That's no. Oh dear. Is it right at the top? Come on. No. That is 1A. Right. Seedlings placed. So germination data was taken for 12-day growth stage and represents hypercotyl extension. Seedlings placed under grow lights for 4-day development. The data was compared with control. Figure 2A shows tomato seeds. Okay, so 2A is tomato seeds. Okay, good. Okay, this is the growth difference depending on what you've got there. Okay. Figure 3A and 3B are graphs showing redox ratio. This is how they determine what is good. Okay, you should read this. I'm getting tired and really I would like to have read this, but I want to arrange this in a better way, so probably I'm going to do that. The things that I think are very, very good in this data here is these are kind of like the time in minutes. Sorry, that's the redox ratio. Ignore that. It's these ones here. This is for soybeans, and these are, I think it's 48 seeds or whatever, or 38 seeds or something. Maybe it's, where does it say? It says up here. They have a particular weird number that they choose. I don't know. Anyway, I'm losing the will to live now. Right, so you can see here the control 1 and control 2 have much less seed emergence after 167 days. And as you go up, like even at 167 days, both of the control, the actual treated mere seeds, they're reaching the same kind of germination that you don't see for another 30 days. Is that right? No, that's hours rather. Sorry, hours. 167 hours here, 196 hours here. So, you know, it's quite a bit of time there before you're seeing the seeds. And in fact, right the way over here at 286. So basically your seeds are coming out of the ground quicker. Okay. These are field emergence as well. So, you know, you've basically got no seeds here in the control, but you're getting quite a few seeds coming out within 6 days. And here at 11 days, you've got a very large number of seeds. It's way ahead of the controls. And also your ear development, you're getting a much more ear development, and depending on the voltages used in the sweet corn here, you're getting more ear development at a particular voltage. So basically there's a lot of learning gone into this. This could be replicated with the fairly simple apparatus that people could use as described here at the top here. So I'll go through the embodiment, shall I, or the process. The present invention relates to a method for significantly improving the rate and uniformity of germination and early growth, as well as increased yield in plants, particularly commercial crops, by a cost-effective treatment of the seeds using electron avalanches in a manner that can be reliably duplicated and lends itself well to commercial exploitation. The method provides an apparatus for exposing seeds to organized avalanches of electrons from a flat electrode. Right. High power supply, AC, so it says the voltages here, 60 or 220 hertz ripple in the DC, that's the basic ripple. So these avalanche pulses commonly occur at 0.1 to 30 hertz range between the electrodes 11 and 12 and are a product of voltage gradient and conductivity. The term self-organized means that there is a discharge between the electrodes 11 and 12 upon voltage, the voltage and the environmental conditions between the electrodes. Okay, electrodes and power supply. Using a spacing between the electrodes 11 and 12, preferably 8 centimeters, although other spacings, preferably between about 1 and 20 centimeters, can be used, but it will alter the effective voltages, and inducing a voltage gradient between the electrodes of about 2 kilovolts or more. 2 kilovolts or more. 2 kilovolts is like the 2 kilo electron volts. Other voltages can be used up to but below the electrical breakdown voltage in air corona discharge. Results in the production of organized electron avalanches which take the form of sharp, regular electrical conductivity pulses of relatively uniform amplitude in air between electrodes 11 and 12. Such spontaneously organized electron avalanches have been described in the scientific literature, most notably by NASA, as examples of low-density, low-energy plasma in air at ambient pressure. This is in 1971. Such spontaneously organized electron avalanches have been described in 1971. The frequency of the avalanche pulses rises spontaneously with increasing voltage. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Goes into all of the detail which is in the graphs. Talks about different voltages here. Talks about how you determine whether it's working, the chemical changes in the plant. It talks about a detector here, this one here, rather than using this kind of electrical detector here, it's actually using a coil. It says the coil 101 usually has 10,000 to 100,000 turns, preferably 80,000 turns. And it's a way of detecting these electron avalanches, okay? And we might be able to use that detector. Now, one point I must say here is this produces EVOs. The EVOs are going into the seeds. They are, in my view, adding a lot of chi in there. The question is, we know these persist for some time. If they persist for a long period of time in the seeds, then they could actually be acting to cohere chi whilst the seed is growing, and whilst the seed is, the plant is living. It actually potentially gives the seed these little micro machines that are able to pull in energy from the environment in life force ways. Likewise, we don't necessarily want to be exposed to these charge clusters, and so these devices will need the shielding. This is another technology, I believe, that will be needing the shielding that we want to be able to develop in order to make these safe. You will have systems where you have a conveyor belt, these kind of discharges, these pulse discharges, which are shown here, optimum for the particular seeds over the distance that's particular for applying them, will produce charge clusters. This particular device, separated from the treatment, it only works because some of the charge clusters are able to go out and interact with this coil. And therefore, we will need shielding, okay, for operators. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. It goes into a lot of detail and it's well worth a read. I will obviously include the links. So let me see if I can find the actual claims here. Now, we'll go through the claims, okay. And then we'll wrap up. A method for treating a seed to enhance growth characteristics of the seed, which comprises providing the seed between a pair of separated, spread apart electrodes as an anode and cathode, having a gap between them with seed on or adjacent to the anode. Applying direct current DC voltage to the anode and the cathode using a power supply with an output voltage with an impressed alternating current AC ripple having a frequency of up to 220 Hertz on the output voltage so as to produce self-organized or pulsed avalanches of electrons moving from cathode towards and into the seeds between the anode and the cathode, or on the anode for a period of time, which enhances the growth characteristics of the seeds. This can be literally seconds that you need to do this treatment, so it can be a continuous process on a conveyor belt. Storing the seed for a period of time before planting, sufficient to provide the seed with enhanced growth characteristics. Yeah, if you plant the seeds immediately, it doesn't work. He's saying there's some biophysical changes that need to occur in there, and it might be because these structures are in there doing work, and that would seem to be the case. The method of claim 1, wherein the seed is selected from a group consisting of corn, carrot, tomato, soybean, rice, pepper, navy beans, wheat, and oats. The method of any one of the claims 1 and 2, wherein a redox activity of the seed before and after the treatment is measured to determine the effectiveness of the treatment. The method of claim 1, wherein the treatment of applying step B is between 1 second and 30 minutes. Okay? Even 30 minutes is just not a lot of time when you want to have a much better outcome for your seeds that you're planting. The method of any of the claims 1 or 2, wherein avalanches are measured during step B. The method of claim 4, wherein during step B, the avalanches of electrons are measured using a solenoid coil through which the electrons pass. The method of any one of claims 1, 2, or 4, wherein the DC voltage is between 0.5 kilovolts, that's kind of like the breakdown voltage per centimeter of air, to below a spark breakdown voltage in air, and the avalanches are between 0.1 and 30 Hertz. The method of any one of claims 1 or 2, wherein the current is measured during the step. A method for treating seeds to enhance growth characteristics, providing the seed between the pair, blah, 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 applying the direct current and the AC ripple on the output DC voltage so as to produce self-organized or pulsed avalanches of electrons moving from the cathode towards and into the seeds between the anode, storing the seed for a period of time. That's basically it, really. So, essentially, what we have potentially learnt here is a means by which we understand, in my view, potentially more of what's going on in crop circles, how that led Levengood to create this patent, the implications of this patent, the implications, the fact that charge clusters are somehow imparting a better ability to grow and apparently in sync. And I think part of that is to do because the charge clusters are coherent, and I think the other part of that is to do with the fact that you are maximizing the genetic potential based on the quality of the initial seed to reach its potential. So, like, if you have children and they have the ability to reach a particular height, a particular strength, a particular mental agility, a particular physicality, and you do not nourish them both intellectually and physically during their very early formative years, their whole rest of their life can be very much less capable compared to what they could have genetically achieved. Even in the early stages of pregnancy, if you have the wrong foods or you have the wrong negative ingest or exposure to environmental conditions, then your child may never reach its genetic potential, his or her genetic potential. So this is kind of what I'm saying, is that you're taking the seed, you're giving it this maximizing capability, and it can grow. Now, when it's in the ground, I think we can create super storm water, like, and then feed that, and again, it will improve it during its growing phase. And then when it's ready to be harvested, you can then maximize the harvest and lower the losses by using maybe the wind hex at that point. And in addition, we've learned that potentially we could use the negative effects of this to treat fields and weed plants such that they produce unviable seeds, or you can prepare the ground without using a broad spectrum herbicide like glyphosate, Roundup. Okay, so I'm going to have a look to see if you've got any questions before I do a quick roundup of what we talked today, to coin a phrase. So, could you quickly review back and forth hysteresis method of electron 2 kilovolts you described in part 1? Yeah, so I can. So that was in the first part of Crop Circle. I will pull up the slides there. So, so Ken Shoulders, he said that EVOs emit up to 2 kilo electron volt electrons. And I asked the question, why? Because electrons have electric and magnetic fields associated with them. Well, they're charged particles and they have a moment. And so you can't imagine them flying out of these structures very easily, except through the weak point, in my view. And how can we get to a point of of creating these things? Well, the thing is that 2 kilo electron volt electrons can produce 2 kilo electron volt photons through the process of bremsstrahlung, and this is breaking radiation. So when you have a nucleus of, say, tungsten, and you have a high energy electron coming into it, and it gets slowed down by coming close to the atom of tungsten, it will emit X-rays. And this is exactly the way that X-rays are produced to create X-rays of your teeth and of X-rays of your bones in a normal X-ray device. So this is bremsstrahlung radiation, breaking radiation. That's how, with electrons, you create photons, okay? And this is a way where a 2 kilo electron volt photon coming out of an EVO can interact with metal, produce a load of photons at a range of energy, and as long as those photons are above the band gap, the photoelectric emitting level, then if you have a negatively biased electrode, you can create a lot of extra electrons that then can feed the EVO. And this is one of the methods that Ken Shoulders was talking about in order to load the exotic vacuum object up with electrons. So thank you very much, Vanilla Isis, very kind of you. So when a high energy electrons, such as 2 kiloelectron volt electrons, are decelerated or deflected by the electric field of a nucleus, they can emit photons with energies up to the initial kinetic energy of the electron. Okay, so you can get up to 2 kiloelectron photons. But likewise, using the photoelectric effect, 2 kiloelectron volt photons can produce 2 kiloelectron volt electrons through the photoelectric effect. In this process, a photon with sufficient energy strikes an electron, typically in a metal, and transfers its energy to the electron, causing the electron to be ejected from the material. So if you have wavelength over 2 kiloelectron volt, that is actually in the X-ray range, and it has a scale of 620 picometers. And I asked whether that could define the lower bound of the TORs, because in a EVO. So what I'm saying is, a photon can fly around in that extremely magnetic structure inside the ball lightning, inside the magnetohydrodynamic system, because a photon is a photon. It doesn't get affected by electromagnetism. It just, you know, in the same way, it's not pulled by a magnetic field. It just moves in a straight line. So if you have them produced in your system here, then the photon, if it was produced in here or here, it could fire out and it could go in any direction. But let's say it went this way, it would hit the metal or the electrons that are in the core and shoot one out. Okay, it just knocks it out like a billiard ball, right? Really, in this case, excites it out of the metal, let's say. And so what I'm saying is that if this here, the n-level loop at a particular scale, is causing a current loop, and you've got electrons going around in here, inside this magnetic field, that produces synchrotron radiation, which you need a wheel within a wheel within a wheel minimally to produce the stable structure. And so this is 1 meter, and your wheel within a wheel within a wheel is roughly this. It's a little bit smaller than that, but let's say, and the resonant cavity needs to be half the wavelength. And so it turns out that it's about 25.94 picometers with this rough calculation. And that is within the ballpark of what the atomic radius is for atomic hydrogen. And so I believe that atomic hydrogen potentially is the limiting factor. That means 2 kiloelectron volts is the highest energy photon that can be produced through synchrotron radiation, and then that can interact and produce the 2 kiloelectron volt electrons. Thank you very much, Craig. It's very kind of you to say. He says somehow I'm one of his favourite people. I'm doing what I can. Right, so I'm going to have a look. Okay, so if there are any other questions here. Jeffrey Wilson says, Levengood determined that plants grown with water from the splash pattern grew at 174% accelerated rate. Describe splash pattern. Do you mean that's like where something came out? Yeah, well, it's going to be this process, and I think if you treat the water so that it's high in oxygen content, dissolved oxygen content, and then you treat that with either cavitation or corona discharge, pulse discharge, in the same kind of way, you'll be able to get water that is pretty magical. I think cavitation is the best way to do it, to be honest. Fastest way.
How much superstorm water have you been drinking? Not enough. I honestly get my chi from young mushrooms. And I will launch another I will launch another Substack called Magnets and Mushrooms. And I have about 10 years, maybe 12 years of mushroom harvesting and crops and stuff. But this was Boletus edulis that we picked yesterday. And you want to get young ones ideally. So there we go. That's a load of Boletus. There we go. Very, very fine mushrooms here. And this was my dinner this evening. There we go. Loads of those mushrooms in there. Really, really, really lovely. And I think they've got a lot of chi in them because they are fruiting bodies and they're trying to grow and so on. I'll talk about that separately another time. Yeah, so good. Oh, sorry, splash pattern from an ice circle. Okay, interesting. Thank you for clarifying that, Jeffrey. So Jeffrey says, Bob Levingood and I did an experiment using water from frozen ice circle to germinate seeds. Okay, excellent. All right. Well, I think we can replicate those findings in a technological way. Okay, if there's no more questions, I'll just do a quick review. Okay. Play nice there in the chat, guys. Right. So this was Crop Circles 2. And in this, we discussed the fact that Dr. Takaaki Matsumoto had, it would appear, in either the late 1980s or early 1990s, probably 1993. Thank you very much, Verity Hound. Have you been working on your merch designs? I should be. I'll get to that. I wanted to do the Kickstarter first, and then we'll look at that. But I've got a lot of ideas in my head, so yes, I have done things in my head, but I need to do that. And this says mystery circles, and he also said mystery circles, as I said here in the front of his book in English as well. That little photo album. And this was the mystery circle he visited, and he's got a couple of other looks here. You can see there's some vorticity here, and maybe some counter vorticity here. It's a shame that he couldn't get an aerial view of this, but this was then, and this is in Shinoji, which I think is in the main island. So he actually travelled. I think he travelled quite some distance to go and see this. This is also in the same photo set, but I just don't think this is a crop circle unless I could see this from above. I just looks like the onion has laid down with a prevailing wind, and certainly I've seen this in my own crops. It's just laying over one side. Although, I don't know, when you're looking at it, it almost looks like someone's manually laid it this way as well. It's laid it that way, laid it this way. These are the tram lines here. So, yeah, I think someone's just
manually laid that or Wins laid it, I don't know. But anyway, I don't think there's anything interesting there. Thank you to Jeffrey Wilson, who's in the chat here. Thank you for your participation today. He found the original article here from the 5th of July 1985, talking about this from the West Sussex County Times. And the important fact here was the main circle was 18 yards across and the smaller ones 5 yards. And the smaller circles appeared to be spaced at an equal distance from the center. And that allowed, with this image that I got from this link from Valerie Martin, thank you Valerie Martin, that you can see it really is very precisely made. And this is kind of the view that I had from the road. This looked like it's taken from up on the hill with a good lens. And this is Tony Wicks, who owned or managed the land at the time, almost doing a kind of like Tesla bull lightning in either hand type image, which I think is quite amusing. But this allowed us to adjust the sketch drawing that we had in the original newspaper article that I found from 1998, where this was off-centered to centered, and then it much more accurately reflects the top of the altar in the underground in Austria. And so it's pretty darn accurate at this point. So the top of this altar looks like this, and this bit is this structure, and these are the same scale as that, and that's basically the same scale as that with the same proportional offset. So I wanted to find out about what the times were, and he mentioned when we were there that it was this Qatar cross, and I didn't know what it quite meant, but I found this Occitan cross, which is actually a Qatar, spelt like this cross, and this is from the 12th century. He didn't mention the date that this was from, but this is from the 12th century. And so this is the sub-tor structure, which is made of 4 things. So this is 4 at the n level, and then it's 4 at the n-1 level structure. So the n level is made by 4, and the n-1 level is made by 4. And this is essentially the same as this. And I would imagine that the Crusades were going to look for the Holy Grail and the magic in the Holy Land. And this being from the 12th century is quite appropriate to be in this place on the altar. And it places it right at the sort of end of the Crusades, which I think is interesting. And did they find this magic or potential magic? Were they just copying symbols from the Holy Land without any thought, or did they actually have an understanding? I think, the jury's out, but I think they kind of knew what they were doing to a degree. And in the next image, you'll see that the relationship between the altar here, and it's loading up the video now, which is taking some time. Sorry about that. Okay, and it skipped over it, didn't it? Okay, so here's the altar, which is raised up. There's a walkway to get to the altar, and it's this thing which I found absolutely fascinating when I saw it. This is basically the same as the thing at the center of the altar, but rotated 45 degrees. And it's these vortex and anti-vortex with a ring core there. And apparently these were so soft that you could put your fingers in them, so they had to impregnate them with high pressure resin to stabilize them. And he told us at the time that these were from the 12th century. So that lines up with the Qatar cross, the cross that I was referring to earlier. Now, looking at the anti-vortex on this side, if we zoom in, you can see it has this very particular structure here. It's a 4-order structure. So again, the subtor here, which would have been one of 4, is also got 4 in there. So this is stable and stable. And then if we look in more depth at what the potential meaning is here, we have a club's cross, which is itself a cross, a form of cross, which means it's suggesting that that even has 4. And is it the case that this has a vortex and anti-vortex pair in here? So this is a wheel within a wheel within a wheel. Each level of those has a 4-tor substructure, and at the level below that, it's got at least a vortex and an anti-vortex potentially. So that was that, and then we looked at all of the kind of work from this particular paper here by Levengood and so on, which for me, the most incredible discussion was around two vortices, a vortex and an anti-vortex coming together. It actually puts the maths into the situation, and that was defined in 1957 by Prandtl and Tietjens. So they already understood the nature of vortex and anti-vortex in these systems way back then, and the relationship and effects on plants, and how we can use that to potentially deal with seeds in a very good way to improve their growth, like here, and to cause weeds to be affected in a negative way. So with that, if you haven't got any more questions, I will say thank you very much. Buenas noches, dobro noc, good night.